Last year I made a video titled The Downfall of AEW in 2023, in which I called 2023 AEW's worst year so far. And as we approach the end of 2024 and reflect on what goes down as AEW's 6th year, it had me thinking whether or not 2024 had now taken that moniker and now that was AEW's worst year. Because on one hand, whilst I think the wrestling and on-screen product has overall been better than it was last year, business has objectively been down with ratings and attendances at an all-time low, though they did also get a good money TV deal, which helps for the case of it not being their worst year, but we're going to investigate all that and more in today's video as we go on a journey through the year that was 2024 for All Elite Wrestling, looking back at every AEW event I've covered and all the drama and controversy that we saw. Let's get right into it. I think 2024 started out pretty alright for AEW. Dynamite for the year began pretty strong, and I thought the on-screen TV product week to week was actually pretty solid, and the most solid it had been in a while. It was the most consistent the product had been since before All In. A big part of that was because this section of the year was all about Sting, as AEW built up to his final match in wrestling by having him and Darby win the tag titles, and Sting's send-off tour as a whole was just awesome, as his final wrestling match would take place at Revolution, teaming with Darby against the Young Bucks, who are now in full EVP mode, and it was a great send-off for Sting and a very good show as well. The match, of course, was absolutely insane. Shortly after, Revolution would see the debut of Kazuchika Okada, possibly one of AEW's biggest ever signings, and he aligned with the EVPs and the returning scapegoat Jack Perry, who was back for the first time in AEW after the CM Punk drama of last year. And thus the new Elite was formed and they would take over television. And around this time we would also see the first round of budget cuts from AEW in their history, as there was a big round of 10 wrestlers and personnels being released from AEW in a first of its kind mass firing from AEW. Stu Grayson is an odd one because Stu Grayson is someone I've discussed on this channel before recently, as he came into AEW on the first ever show, Double or Nothing 2019, debuting alongside Evil Uno as the Dark Order, and obviously that stable would grow and have regular TV time for the first couple of years. They had Brody Lee in the group, they recruited Anna Jay and Preston Vance and Alan Angels and Colt Cabana, they were teamed up with Hangman Page, but after Page won the world title, their TV time got more occasional and Stu Grayson would depart the company in 2022 before returning to AEW in 2023, I believe the first wrestler to leave the company and come back, and he'd return briefly as a member of the Dark Order but would then leave the group to join the Righteous in Ring of Honor. But then out of nowhere, after losing to the Dark Order in July of 2023, Stu Grayson has not been seen in AEW or Ring of Honor programming or alongside the Righteous whatsoever, and now obviously he has been released, meaning he's the first AEW wrestler to exit the company twice. He's the first to get released and have his contract expire, I guess. I don't really know what to say, but I guess if they weren't using him, then this is the best case and he can go work the indies and do some good stuff alongside Evil Uno on DPW and other promotions. Jose the Assistant, I don't really know what much else to say about Jose the Assistant other than that he was Andrade's manager in the company. That's kind of what he was known for and what he did in AEW, and obviously this past December Andrade departed AEW and is now back in the WWE. I don't think Jose the Assistant has done anything since that happened, so there's probably not much else use for him. I'm guessing that's why he's been released here, and I don't really know what else to say. We have Dasha Gonzalez, who is an ex-WWE wrestler and also an ex-WWE announcer, and when she came to AEW, she started off announcing for the Spanish broadcast and even tried one match in AEW. She was part of that weird tag team tournament, and she was definitely a lot better as a ring announcer than she was as a wrestler, and I think she was pretty good at what she did. She did ring announcing, but mainly backstage interviewing, and I thought again that she was pretty good, so I'm actually quite surprised to see her be released here. But AEW has a surplus of ring announcers and backstage interviewers, and they already have Renee Paquette, so I'm guessing that she's just been lost in the shuffle of all the ring announcers, and that's what's happened here. The Boys, aka the Tate Twins, this is a really weird release due to the fact that they were right in the middle of a Ring of Honor storyline and one of the most major Ring of Honor storylines going on right now between Johnny TV and Dalton Castle. The Boys went along with Dalton Castle and they were a package deal. The Boys always came along with Dalton Castle, and this storyline with Dalton Castle and Johnny TV saw Johnny TV beat Castle to steal the Boys from him. And it was a pretty good storyline, and like I said, the Boys were right in the middle of the storyline, but this past week on Ring of Honor, the Boys weren't present for the Dalton Castle and Johnny TV segments on the show, and it was said by Taya that they were eaten by bears or something, and now they've been released, so I guess that's the official way that they've been written off in Ring of Honor, which is crazy. Gravity, I believe, started making appearances last year for AEW, and I think he was signed for pretty much one reason, and that was just for him to face Pac. Just so they could do the man Gravity forgot memes and forgot jokes. But honestly, this is one of those guys I didn't even realize he was signed, and there's a couple of these guys on this list that, again, I didn't realize was signed, and I'm surprised he actually was released because I quite enjoyed him and thought he was a good wrestler and a good high flyer and a fun masked wrestler. I think he's kind of a perfect fit for Ring of Honor, so I don't know why they've released him. I'm not expecting to see him on AEW TV or anything, but you could at least keep him around for Ring of Honor, surely. There's Jora Joel, who again didn't realize he was even signed to the company or signed at all, because I don't remember the last time I even saw him make an appearance for AEW. I remember him from the pandemic era, and he was of course part of the Hardy family office, and I don't think he ever actually made it onto TV with the group. I think he was always left on Dark, even though he was in the group, and then obviously that group died out, and I haven't seen or heard of him in AEW since that group died out. He might have been on Dark, but I was never really a Dark viewer. Either way, once again, just didn't realize he was signed. He's not been on AEW TV or programming in a long time, but I guess now he never will again. Anthony Henry getting released is a true shame because Anthony Henry is a really good worker. If you don't know, Anthony Henry is in a tag team with JD Drake, who has been kept here, so they clearly rate JD Drake. And they're called the Workhorsemen, and they're a very underrated team. I'm going to put some footage on screen right now of their work in DPW, which is some stuff you should definitely check out. And just a guy I'm puzzled that why wouldn't they want to use him on Rampage or on Ring of Honor. This is a guy who again comes with a tag team partner, JD Drake. They're a good tag team, so why release Anthony Henry? I don't understand it. And the guy is also injured. He's injured, he's recovering from injury, and I know that injury didn't happen on AEW, but that's still a bit of a shame to release him while he's injured. Slim J. What do I even have to say on Slim J? One of the weirdest AEW signings. I'm not sure what he even did other than in 2022 and 2023 for a bit. The Trustbusters, himself, Parker Boudreaux, Sonny Kiss, and Ari Daivari, the most random faction in AEW history. I do know he has been on Ring of Honor, but I know he's also been a jobber on there and kind of been doing the same thing he was doing on Dark before. And yeah, he's just a jobber. I think he was mainly brought in for his wrestling experience, but he's clearly a guy that was never going to go anywhere in AEW, rising up the divisions and winning titles, and clearly they don't see much else use in him. But unfortunately, he wasn't the only Trustbuster that was released that day. Parker Boudreaux was also released from his AEW contract, and when I saw that AEW were doing cuts, I was preparing myself to see Parker Boudreaux get released because I think it's something that was probably going to happen, and of course, it has. Parker is a guy who was signed to WWE, being billed as the next Brock Lesnar, which is a crazy way to hype someone up, but he was released from his WWE contract so early on when he had just started to do something in NXT. Clearly, WWE did not see anything in him, but AEW of course picked him up, and like I said, he joined the Trustbusters before also joining the Mogul Affiliates. And his stays in both factions were short-lived because he didn't last in the Mogul Affiliates as they merged with the Mogul Embassy Dynasty and he was left behind, and he's been out with an injury until he returned to wrestling recently at a AAA show where he called AAA his home. He then clarified his comments and said that AEW is also one of his homes and he has at least months left on his AEW contract, but alas, he has now been released from his AEW contract. He's not been seen on AEW program in God knows how long. He's had one match on Rampage and that's his entire career on AEW TV. He's had just the one singular match on AEW TV and then done a whole load of Dark appearances, and then Dark obviously died, so there was not much use for him after that, and clearly the guy just isn't rated by WWE and now AEW. That same day of mass releases from AEW also saw the CM Punk and AEW drama pick right back up again, because of course it did. Will this drama ever end? Will either side ever shut up about it? Find out next year. But this drama came back into the limelight again after CM Punk did a tell-all interview exposing AEW. For over 6 months now, we have heard all the stories and all the different sides and all the accounts from the infamous backstage scuffle that took place at All In Wembley 2023 between CM Punk and Jack Perry. The incident of course took place following Jack Perry's pre-show match with Hook, where during this match Jack Perry and Hook brawled on a car windshield, which prompted Jack Perry to yell directly at the camera, "Real Glass, go cry me a river." This was a reference to a few weeks prior during a Collision taping where, according to CM Punk, Jack Perry was cussing out AEW agents and officials who didn't want him to do a spot involving Real Glass on the show. CM Punk had to intervene and tell Jack not to do it, and that was that until Jack Perry said what he said during All In. And these comments by Jack Perry during the match would of course lead to the backstage scuffle they had, where Punk approached him backstage after the match, and there are many different accounts and stories, like I said, for what happened at the time, and we now of course know what did actually happen because we've all seen it, but we'll get there in a second. Both men were sent home and suspended for the incident, with Punk ultimately being terminated from his AEW contract in the end, and Tony Khan would address the AEW fans at All Out in Chicago the next week by saying he felt in danger for his life, and that's why he had to make the decision he did, which further stirred the pot. But that was it for CM Punk in AEW. CM Punk of course returned back to WWE, and the rest is history, and All In could be left in the past. Or not. Last week, CM Punk appeared for an interview with Ariel Helwani, and this was his first major interview outside of WWE, post WWE return and AEW departure, so you already knew that everything was going to be discussed and addressed in this interview, and of course it was. The interview was kind of like the current day version of that Colt Cabana podcast he did all those years ago after he left WWE, as he spoke pretty negatively of his experience in AEW, called Tony Khan a clown, and spoke about the All Out and All In incidents, and he talks about the Perry incident and gave his own version of events, pretty much stating the scuffle was minor and he, quote, responsibly choked Jack Perry. And like I said, Punk telling the All In story was only a small part of an interview where he spoke very negatively on AEW. Like I said, he called Tony a clown, he said that AEW isn't a real business, are unprofessional, and talks about how he wanted to quit AEW for a long time before he was fired. AEW would respond to this interview in typical AEW fashion by taking subtle digs at CM Punk on TV via the Young Bucks, by having them giving shoutouts to the scapegoat Jack Perry, who hadn't been mentioned in months on AEW TV. And it could have just been left at that, with AEW doing their usual little digs, but instead they then decided to take it one step further, as on this past week's Collision immediately after night 1 of WrestleMania, it was announced that the Young Bucks would be airing the never before seen All In backstage footage. And this was obviously a major shock and a massive announcement, and when reports came out that it wasn't going to be a troll like many were speculating, and they were legit going to air the All In footage, people were even more shocked. And then of course the night of AEW Dynamite came around last night, and eyes were locked in to see if they were actually gonna do it, and they were actually gonna show it. And let me tell you that the Mad Lads actually did it. they actually showed the full AEW All-In backstage scuffle between CM Punk and Jack Perry. The scuffle aired with no audio and just a video, as it showed Jack Perry in the backstage gorilla area post-match, surrounded by his opponent Hook, Samoa Joe, referees, producers, and on the right there's a row of monitors that presumably Tony Khan is behind. In comes CM Punk, exchanges some words with Perry, shoves Perry once while he's fixing his hair, which gets the whole room alert, shoves him again, Perry goes for the takedown, Punk gets him in a headlock, in runs Samoa Joe and all the producers to break it up, and as it's being broken up, it looks as though CM Punk goes right towards Tony Khan, and I'm going to assume that unless there's a separate incident, this could be what Tony was referring to when he said he felt his life was threatened. And that's about that. The Young Bucks are presenting this footage and kind of trying to make it into a storyline for their match with FTR, which while as an AEW viewer can be appreciated, the damage is done to any viewer new to AEW, and following the airing of the backstage footage, all anyone was talking about was of course the footage and not the storyline that it's meant to be a part of. The scuffle was kind of a mix of all the previous accounts of it, which makes sense, and it kind of fits exactly what Punk said and proved him right. And no, I'm not arguing that Punk wasn't being unprofessional. He was being unprofessional, but when did he ever argue that he wasn't? It proved him right as the exchange went exactly how he told it on the Ariel Helwani interview, and all AEW did with airing this footage backstage was make themselves look like a joke to non-AEW viewers. Heck, even the fans in the arena were chanting CM Punk while it was being shown to them. All in all, the overall reaction to this has been very negative on AEW, with people seeing it as unprofessional, proving CM Punk right, and not the way the company needs to go. All of which I kind of agree with. It's happened now. What's happened has happened, and AEW will feel the consequences of this, but it's time they need to move on from this situation. Brawl In and Brawl Out feel like they were light years ago, and it's crazy they're still giving it attention. And yes, I also think everyone involved in the incident should also just stop mentioning it, not just AEW, but the fans will never forget the incident. It was an infamous moment in wrestling history, and now it's being brought back up again in a very public way by AEW, who have done that by choice. Just didn't need to happen. It felt like AEW had a great opportunity to get away from these incidents by just ignoring Punk's comments. That was the time to finally just ignore what he was saying. To me, there's no point acknowledging it for storyline purposes because CM Punk's not even in the company anymore. I was the biggest advocate for them to turn the Brawl Out stuff into a storyline with the Elite, but that's while CM Punk was still with the company. He's not with you anymore. Don't worry about him. It doesn't matter. To this day, I'll say that I don't blame AEW for firing CM Punk. It was the second scuffle he had gotten into, and he himself said he wanted to quit. So you may as well just let him go and exist in WWE and just forget about it all. But of course, that can't be done, and it came back to bite them because reports are going around that people in AEW are very frustrated with the fact that this aired and that a wound has been reopened by needlessly giving this incident attention. And again, I don't blame them. I feel bad for the talent at this point who are being overshadowed by the decision making. Like just before the footage aired, there was a great match between Penta El Zero Miedo and Adam Copeland that now nobody cares about because of what happened after. And the same goes for everything else in the show, which is now just an afterthought, and some of which I thought was really solid. To be fair though, the worst thing AEW did on Dynamite last night was air a Chris Jericho match right after that segment. And speaking of bad decision making, apparently airing the footage was entirely Tony Khan's idea, and not even the Young Bucks were keen on it. Like I said, AEW just needs to move on from this, but the fact they're using it for the storyline with FTR and the Young Bucks makes me fear that we're not getting away from this for a while, and with a Jack Perry return probably not too far around the corner, again, I feel like we're not going to be getting away from this for a while. Non-AEW fans watched this and thought AEW was a joke, while AEW fans watched this and just want to see some actual wrestling. This incident hurt the integrity of the company. I'm sure AEW fans don't want to keep hearing about it over and over, like just focus on the positives, focus on the wrestling. Like that's pretty much my thoughts here. The decision to air the footage obviously only hurt AEW and didn't help them with ratings in the long run, as they'd go into their first pay-per-view post-security footage, that being AEW Dynasty. Alright, we had a 3-match pre-show to start off the show. I only saw this pre-show in bits. We had Trent versus Sydal, Matt Sydal to open this show. This is a match I did not see. I did see that Trent did, of course, pick up the win. We then had Orange Cassidy and Shibata against Shane Taylor Promotions, and this match was really good from what I saw. I thought Lee Moriarty was the MVP of the match, and him and Orange Cassidy were working, with Cassidy and Shibata obviously picking up the win. You then had the Acclaimed and Billy Gunn versus the Bang Bang Gang for the Undisputed Trios titles. Max Caster definitely gonna get in trouble for his bars, like he said in his pre-match rap. They were very questionable bars, and this was actually a surprisingly good match though. I thought that this was actually a decent match, but the issue is, the entire time, I just wanted the match to end. Every single pinfall that the Bang Bang Gang got, I was just like, please let it be a 3, please get these titles off the Acclaimed and Billy Gunn. And they did, as JY and the Gunmen picked up the win, and they are the new Undisputed Trios champions, and hopefully this is the start of a Trios title revival, and we can get these titles back to form. The opener of the show is Pac versus Kazuchika Okada for the AEW Continental Championship, which was a super hot match to open the show. This match was hot from the start to the end. The crowd was super into it, justified. This is awesome chants. Big moments and bumps like Okada DDTing Pac from the barricade to the concrete floor. And Okada on American soil, he's just been so great so far. Pac tries to hit the Black Arrow multiple times, but after the second time, Okada avoids it and hits a gnarly Rainmaker to retain the title in an absolutely awesome opener. We then move into the next trios match, as it's Adam Copeland, Eddie Kingston, and Mark Briscoe against the House of Black. This was classic AEW Trios mayhem. It was a good match, a good standard all-star tag. I will say though, I don't know what's up with Malachi, because Malachi got in there, hardly took any bumps, and I feel like was barely involved in the match compared to the other 5 guys in this match. Regardless though, House of Black get the win, which was shocking to see. I didn't think they would get the win, but it's good, and it's good for the future of the Trios titles potentially, because House of Black getting a bit of new form going, maybe challenge for the Trios title again. That, or maybe a TNT title program with Malachi and Adam Copeland could be coming. I could see Christian Cage joining up with Copeland to face them maybe. This is where they finally do Cope and Christian teaming up in AEW, because that's gonna happen at some point. Speaking of the House of Black, it's House of Black member Julia Hart defending her TBS championship against Willow Nightingale next. And I thought this was a decent match. This was probably the best Julia Hart match since that triple threat with Sky Blue and Chris Statlander where she won the belt. It was a short but sweet match. It was shorter, probably due to Julia Hart's recent reported injuries, but Willow reverses the moonsault and hits the gut-wrench powerbomb to win the title. Awesome moment, feel-good moment, huge pop, and great to see Willow winning the title. And of course, Mercedes Moné came out post-match, and she stares down Willow Nightingale as those two are facing off for the belt at Double or Nothing. That match is going to be awesome, and it seems like they're treating it as a big deal. I mean, it's the first match announced for the show, so I'm very much looking forward to that match. We go into Kyle O'Reilly versus Roderick Strong for the international title up next, and man, this match was so good. These two guys were working. It was a very hard-hitting match, and that's to be expected. These two guys, they're hard-hitting wrestlers, and they're friends. They've worked each other so many times, and they're just gonna beat the crap out of each other. Just smack the living shit out of each other, and that's exactly what they did. They had a really awesome sequence where they were trying to one-up each other with hard-hitting strikes, who can go harder, and it ended up with a flying knee from Roderick Strong and both men going down and selling, getting "This is awesome" chants from the fans immediately. The crowd was so hot for this match. It was just two guys destroying each other. There was no shenanigans from the Undisputed Kingdom, no interference other than failed distraction from Wardlow, which was good that it didn't go through and didn't affect the match in any way, because the match didn't need that. This was my personal match of the night, and Roderick Strong got the win and retained the title. And a big moment post-match, as at the end of the match, Adam Cole and the Kingdom came out, and Adam Cole rose from his wheelchair and began walking. It looks like Adam Cole is back, and they also teased Adam Cole turning on Wardlow, which was very interesting. But like I said, personal match of the night for me, and I wonder what's next for Kyle O'Reilly. I wonder where he goes from here. We then go into Hook versus Chris Jericho, which this was of course the piss break match, but I will say it did actually exceed my expectations a bit, because they did fully commit to the FTW rules. They had just a weapons match, which is good. We didn't need a one-on-one regular contest. That would have been extremely boring. Just get Jericho getting hit with weapons. That's what we like to see. However, the issue came with the ending of the match, because Jericho won. Yeah, he hits the Judas effect twice on Hook, who kicks out of them both 2 consecutive times, made him look awesome, made him look very strong. And then Chris Jericho just smacked him with the bat and got the 1-2-3 and wins the FTW title. The fans have completely turned on Jericho. They were like, please retire chants or something at Jericho, or telling him to go home. And yeah, he did not need to win the FTW title here. I hope Hook wins it back, but for now, just terrible booking. And if the rumors of Hook wanting to leave are indeed true, then I see why at this point. Next up was Toni Storm versus Thunder Rosa for the AEW Women's World Championship. This was a really good, solid match. I think this was probably the best match of timeless Toni Storm as a character so far. And I'd also say it's the best Thunder Rosa match since her return as well. Good return to form for both of them doing what we know they can do. There was of course some ringside shenanigans with Deonna Purrazzo coming out and choosing violence and destroying Luther, brawling to the back with Mariah May, and Toni Storm picks up the win with a Storm Zero, retaining the Women's World Championship. Still not a clue who's going to beat Toni for the title. Maybe it's Mariah at this point, maybe it's still Deonna. Time will tell. Good match here. And then of course we move on to the main match of the night, the match that the most people were probably looking forward to, which is Bryan Danielson versus Will Ospreay. I just can't do any words to give this match any justice. It's a match of the year contender. It's all the stars in the world. A 35-minute barn burner from 2 of the best wrestlers in the world. Like I said, I don't think words will do it justice. Just watch it yourself. Regardless, there were some awesome combinations and counters and sequences. There was the Oz Cutter that was reversed into the Bazaiku knee, which was one of the craziest reversals ever. The fans went nuts. They then had like a mid-air duel where Ospreay won, hitting like a forearm in mid-air, then hit a Tiger Driver, and then hit that elbow to the back of the head and beat Danielson clean. Danielson is doing crazy selling after the match, with doctors tending to him. Really great work from both these lads here. Ospreay looks amazing out of this match, and I guess it's time to start working towards him versus the winner of the main event for the world title at All In. Next up is the Young Bucks, Nicholas Jackson and Matthew Jackson versus FTR for the AEW World Tag Team titles, the vacant tag titles. And this match was a great chapter in their series of matches. I wasn't actually excited about this being a ladder match at first, and I know many others weren't, but I think in the end it was actually a right idea because it's a different profile of match from their other matches. If they did a Bucks versus FTR 4, just regular 2v2, it probably would have felt the same as a lot of the other matches. So doing a ladder match and having a hardcore match in their series of matches, their playlist of matches, it really mixes things up, and it was great. There were loads of ladder spots and table spots, guys smashing through tables and ladders. You had the Young Bucks with a 450 splash to, I believe, Dax through the table. Then Cash Wheeler came flying through the ropes into a table set up on the barricade. It was absolutely wild. But at the final act of the match, Dax Harwood is alone on the ladder, and all of a sudden he can't climb the ladder for some reason, as a masked man comes in, tips the ladder over, costs Dax the win, who probably had enough time to grab it, like I said, and scapegoat Jack Perry is revealed as the masked man, as the Young Bucks climb the ladder and grab the belts themselves. You know what, I did predict this happening. I didn't know if they actually would do it. I have no idea if Jack Perry is now joining this stable with the Young Bucks and Okada, but they've gone full in with this all-in backstage footage stuff. They've used it for the storyline. This match was good in the end. Did they need the Jack Perry interference? I don't know if they did, but I think they were always going to do it. And I guess we'll just see where it goes from here. This was a good match regardless, and I guess Jack Perry is now back in AEW. And then we move on to our main event, as Samoa Joe is defending his World Championship against Swerve Strickland. Swerve has the Black Panther entrance. It's an awesome entrance, and this match as a whole was really awesome. The crowd was still super hot for this match, even despite the long show and the matches before it. And we all know what the result of this match was going to be and what it needed to be. And after we saw that Black Panther entrance, there was no way they couldn't do it. There was a moment towards the end of the match where I really thought this should have been the finish, where Swerve is beating up on Joe and the camera shows him and the title in the frame, and he looks at the title and realizes what he's fighting for, and then goes and hits some crazy mad move on him. I don't even know what it was called, and got a mad near fall. I really thought that was 3 and really thought it should have been 3, but they went to the finish pretty soon after that as Swerve hit the Swerve Stomp on him and got the win and wins the World Championship. A huge moment for Swerve, a huge moment for AEW, and a great main event. Shout out to Samoa Joe, who was probably never planned to be an AEW World Champion, at least from my own presumption. But listen, what a champion he was. I'm glad he got a 4-month reign out of it and he wasn't just a transitional champion. He did a good job as the champion, I think. AEW continued full steam ahead, and it's around this time I'd actually start reviewing Dynamites every week leading up to Double or Nothing, and for a bit afterwards, as there was actually a fair bit going on with the product, with the whole EVP storyline, which was kinda hit or miss. Mercedes Moné had also just signed to AEW, so I wanted to see what the buzz was about, and AEW sure were cooking up some interesting shows. The 8th of May 2024 edition of AEW Dynamite really shocked me, and I don't think I'm the only one who was surprised and caught off guard by this episode of AEW Dynamite. So we're going to discuss all that and more as we discuss this past week of AEW Dynamite, and I'm thinking of doing these weekly, so leave a like if you want to see that, and yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about this past Wednesday's AEW Dynamite. Before we begin discussing yesterday's episode, let's quickly recap the previous week of AEW Dynamite on May 1st, as on that show we saw Christian Cage be revealed as Swerve Strickland's challenger at Double or Nothing. Adam Copeland continued his feud with the House of Black, retaining his TNT gold against Buddy Matthews. Orange Cassidy and Trent Beretta continued their breakup storyline as Cassidy teased an alliance with Don Callis. And we of course saw Kenny Omega get beaten down by the Elite. It was an action-packed Dynamite with lots of stories being started and continued, but as the card for the most recent Dynamite was starting to get announced, yeah, there'd be some continuation from the previous week announced for the card, but overall, this week's AEW Dynamite on paper looked pretty damn weak. And not gonna lie, I was genuinely thinking we were probably in for one of the worst Dynamites of the year. But getting into the show, we start off this week's episode of AEW Dynamite with Orange Cassidy taking on his former best friend's ally, Trent Beretta. And this match was exactly what it should have been. It was a fast-paced, no breaks match. These two guys are locked in a personal feud, so that's exactly how this match should be. They were beating the hell out of each other. Don Callis comes out to ringside and joins the commentary team midway through the match, and the ending of the match saw Trent destroying Orange with 2 pile drivers, a big running knee, and then he goes to take the turnbuckle pad off. But the ref catches him, and while that's going on and while the ref's distracted, Orange removes a turnbuckle pad for himself, drives Trent headfirst into it, and rolls him up for the win. A sneaky win by Cassidy. And then post-match, Trent proceeds to destroy Orange Cassidy, just an uncomfortably long beatdown, but it's only when Cassidy starts getting his licks back that does Chris Statlander and a team of refs run to break it up. Interesting timing. And Orange Cassidy then walks out with Don Callis, and this storyline is interesting to me. I'm starting to think that Cassidy might be the heel in all of this. This definitely doesn't seem like it's over. It was a tainted finish, the post-match antics. I feel like this story is just getting started. We then go to our next segment as we see footage from earlier in the day, seeing the Elite pull in and park in Tony Khan's reserved spot. Tony Khan is still selling the attack. He is reporting remotely apparently, and I imagine still wearing the neck brace, at least I like to think so. And we go right from that into Kenny Omega giving a monologue from a hospital bed as he discusses the attack from the Elite last week and talks about his respect for FTR and how FTR will be taking on the Elite alongside a mystery 2 other men in an Anarchy in the Arena match at Double or Nothing, and those 2 men are gonna be revealed later tonight. And next up we get to hear from Serena Deeb, who is challenging Toni Storm for her women's title at Double or Nothing, as Serena Deeb cuts a heartfelt promo talking about her time away from AEW and her experience with seizures. She sends a nice message to the fans and uses it to build up to the match, but she's of course interrupted by timeless Toni Storm, who is straight out there and gets on the mic and says that she doesn't give a single solitary shit. And then Toni tries to cheap shot her, but she is caught by Serena and then knocked out cold, and Toni just with a great sell. Yeah though, nice build to the match. Serena is full babyface now, and I'm looking forward to this match between the two at Double or Nothing. Next match though, we've got Mariah May still sporting the old Toni Storm persona, and she's taking on the debuting on AEW TV, at least, Harley Cameron. And I don't know about you, but I wasn't sure what to expect with this match, but I will hold my hands up and say I wasn't really expecting it to be good. Mariah May is brilliant, she is a very good wrestler, but I wasn't familiar with Harley Cameron other than that she'd maybe had a couple of indie matches. But yeah man, I was very pleasantly surprised with this match. I thought it was good stuff from both of them. Mariah is obviously great, but Harley Cameron really showed out, and I want to see more of her. So despite Mariah getting the win, it's a successful AEW TV debut for Harley Cameron, I'd say. Post-match though, Harley and Saraya attack Mariah May, and Mina Shirakawa of course makes the save, with Toni Storm nowhere to be seen. We get Swerve Strickland and Christian Cage going face to face. Good promos from the both of them, especially from Swerve. But the main moment of this segment was the Mogul Embassy turning on Swerve. I wasn't expecting this. It was kind of out of nowhere, like it just happened right then and there. But also, Swerve hardly appears with them anymore, and he's outgrown them anyway. It was the correct time and decision to do this. It was gonna happen eventually. Swerve is now a babyface world champ, so they don't need to all be together. He can be world champ, they can go be a trio. It appears as though they aren't joining up with the patriarchy, which is a good thing. I hope they don't. I could be wrong on that though. And we then get a Willow Nightingale backstage interview. She hypes her match with Mercedes Moné at Double or Nothing, and I would have liked to see these two together on screen in front of the crowd, but whatever, we'll discuss that later. And we then get Jay White versus Rocky Romero. This match was a really good match. I really did enjoy this match. Very solid stuff. Especially the last couple of minutes with the sequences at the end from Rocky Romero, who was cooking. Some great near falls, great sequences, and Jay White of course picks up the win, and himself and the Guns beat down Rocky before Pac makes the save. So it looks like we may be getting Death Triangle against the Bang Bang Gang soon for those trios titles. That will definitely be a great match. Next we then have Chris Jericho and Big Bill just destroying some jobbers. Post match though, Jericho cuts a promo, and he's very clearly playing that role of a heel who thinks he's a babyface, and it wasn't a bad promo. It was a pretty decent promo. I mean, of course it was. Chris Jericho is good on the mic, and being real, so far the learning tree hasn't been that bad. I'm gonna let it play out for now because I can't bear Jericho stables for too long, but just for now I'm gonna let it play out because it's not been too bad. But let's not overexpose it like we always do. And it's main event time, as it's Adam Copeland versus Brody King for the TNT title, and awesome match. Just an awesome match. A true main event of a TV show, of a TV wrestling show. Closed out the card brilliantly, and a great match. Copeland has been so great in AEW, and this TNT title run so far has been awesome. Him and Christian really revived that title, my word. There was blood, there was weapons, big table spot. It was a great match, and Cope got the win to retain the title. Brody attacked Copeland after the match, but Kyle O'Reilly made the save, and these two are going to face for the title on Collision. That match will be fun. And shout out to Copeland, man, because he has been working since he came to AEW. I have thoroughly enjoyed his run. However though, this wasn't the end of the show, as we got a surprise overrun. At least it was a surprise to me, and Mercedes Moné is being interviewed. They really gave her the death spot here, and whilst this was a fine promo, I guess, like I said earlier with Willow, I'd much prefer we had the two of them in front of the crowd talking to each other in the ring. These backstage interviews didn't really achieve anything for me. And then we end the show with the Elite coming out, and we get the big reveal for the other two members of Anarchy in the arena. And while some, including me, were thinking it would be the Motor City Machine Guns, it ended up being Eddie Kingston and Bryan Danielson. So we've got ourselves a star-studded match right here. And what better reps for Team AEW than these two guys? Kingston is AEW through and through, and Danielson, you know, he'd just be giving out fines. But yeah, that that's the end of the show, and overall, man, this show was really solid. I'd give it like a B. It was, yeah, just way more solid than I thought it would be, than it had any right to be with the card that was announced. On paper, this didn't look like it was going to be a great show, but every match delivered. Good continuation with storylines as well, and I thought this was just a solid Wednesday night of wrestling. AEW Dynamite last night was quite eventful. It was the penultimate show before Double or Nothing 2024, which is shaping up to be a pretty big pay-per-view for the company, but I think they just made a pretty risky decision that I'm seeing them face a fair bit of criticism for doing, and a lot of other stuff happened as well, so like the video and welcome back to another weekly AEW Dynamite recap. Let's get into the show. We open with Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson of the Blackpool Combat Club taking on Kyle Fletcher and Jeff Cobb, and this match started out in an awesome way as the two teams brawled on the outside whilst Bryan's music continued to play as the match hadn't officially started, and it was a load of fun. It was good vibes, and they got very far into the song, maybe like 2 minutes before they finally made it into the ring and the match begun. And this match was a wild brawl from start to finish. All four of these guys are great workers, and it's hard to have a bad match with these guys on TV. I will say though, unless I missed an explanation somewhere, I don't know why Jeff Cobb was in this match. There may have been something on social media to explain, but that needs to be on TV, and again, I might be wrong, there might have been something I just missed, but I don't know why he was there. Danielson and Mox get the win, and post-match the other two men and Takeshita beat them down, but Claudio comes in and clears the ring, and I'm sensing a trios match in the future, maybe next week. We then see Adam Copeland enter as he's set to call out Malachi Black, but before he's able to do that, he's attacked by Brody King and Buddy Matthews before Malachi comes out to cut a promo on him doing his usual spooky nonsense, and he instructed the House of Black to remove Copeland's wedding ring, and Kyle O'Reilly tried to make the save but got beaten down, and the House of Black destroyed Cope with chairs in the corner. It was brutal, and Copeland and Black are set to face in a barbed wire cage match at Double or Nothing, and I am looking forward to that. We then get an announcement that Eddie Kingston is injured and unable to compete in Team AEW versus Team Elite Anarchy in the arena match at Double or Nothing anymore, and we then get an interview with Dax Harwood, who of course is in that match, and he says they found a replacement for Kingston. Before we go right into the Young Bucks versus Christopher Daniels and Matt Sydal, I love all four of these guys, and this was a nice little match between them. I'm always happy to see Daniels and Sydal on the TV, and this match was obviously quite predictable in the result, with the Young Bucks predictably winning the match, but the main talking point is what happened after the match, as the Young Bucks abused their EVP powers and fired Christopher Daniels on the spot as head of talent relations, which if you don't know, he legit is the head of talent relations for AEW. They tell him it's all good because he's got a whole 30 days of pay left, which people are interpreting as a reference to WWE and their no compete clauses, which yeah, could be, but also it's just any corporate setting, they're EVPs. I'm not sure it's even a reference to that. And yeah, this is interesting to see if this is the start of something for Daniels on TV, or if it's just a one-time angle, or if it's a way to write off Daniels, or if he actually has left the head of talent relations and this is the way to do it on screen. Could be any of the four. Jack Perry also spilt his Ric Flair Woo energy drink all over Tony Schiavone, and is also the first person to ever drink that drink. We get an interview with Toni Storm hyping her match with Harley Cameron, which is of course happening tonight, and she finds out that everyone is banned from ringside. No Mariah May, no Luther, and no Saraya. But up next is the return of Hook, and he's facing some jobber called Sebastian Wolf, who Hook beats in literal seconds with the Red Rum. He then gets on the mic and calls out Jericho and Big Bill, who come on out, and Hook wants his FTW title back, and Jericho responds, but not before responding to the crowd's continuous retire chants, and it's a good promo from Jericho once again, and not a bad learning tree segment, as he tells Hook he needs to win a no DQ match on Collision to earn a shot. Like I said, the learning tree has been surprisingly tolerable so far, but I just already know this is going to overstay its welcome in disastrous fashion. They get into a brawl, and Shibata runs in to clear the ring and save Hook. World Champion Swerve Strickland is up next though, as he's facing Brian Cage, who of course turned on him last week, and these two have a good TV match here. It's of course another predictable win with Swerve getting the win, but it doesn't take away from the match. It was good work from these two here. here. I'm glad they're getting through the whole Mogul Embassy turning on Swerve quickly. Like, they don't need to dwell on this for multiple months. Just have Swerve go over Cage like they have here before moving on. Post-match though, Swerve looks to murder Brian Cage with a chair, but is blindsided by Nick Wayne and Killswitch before Christian Cage and Mother Wayne came out and smiled as his sons destroyed Swerve, with Nick Wayne destroying a family photo of Swerve's family. Cage then cuts a promo about Swerve and Nick Wayne's history, and this is surely a match we'll be getting on the Go Home show. It just feels natural we're going to get this, if not soon. Backstage interview with Hook and Shibata about Jericho and what just happened. Shibata says he also wants a piece of Jericho, and Hook is chatting too, but he is interrupted by the returning Samoa Joe, who is sporting a nice floral attire, and he basically tells Hook that he is a letdown and isn't meeting his potential. Shibata on Translate then says that Joe is too large to be wearing floral, which was really funny. Toni Storm versus Harley Cameron is up next, and while this was probably the weakest match of the night, it still wasn't bad. Harley Cameron looked decent once again, Toni looked her usual self, and it was okay, it was watchable. The main story was Serena Deeb coming out and watching this match. She was there just on the ramp awkwardly watching for a long while. It was okay, like I said, it was definitely watchable, definitely not as good as Mariah May versus Harley Cameron from the previous week, but Toni Storm of course picks up the win with Serena Deeb watching on. I'm looking forward to that match at Double or Nothing as well. We get a promo segment with Roderick Strong, the Kingdom, and Wardlow, of course, all of the Undisputed Kingdom, and they're chatting with Will Ospreay, who is challenging Roddy for the international title at Double or Nothing. This was a good segment, nice build to the match, nice promo from Ospreay. I am very surprised they're doing this match and that Ospreay is getting a shot at this belt, because I think a lot of us imagined that he'd be facing Swerve at All In for the world title. Unpopular opinion though, I wouldn't actually mind Ospreay winning the international title and then facing Swerve at All In to unify both the belts, because AEW for me has too many men's singles titles. Like, we don't need 4 of them. But also I would like to see Roddy have more of a reign, so I probably see him winning. Roddy gets personal, bringing up Ospreay's family life, and Ospreay says he's going to show the world why he's on another level. Nice to see a promo not get a beatdown and a save angle right after. And next up we have Mercedes Moné and Willow Nightingale doing a contract signing for their TBS title match at Double or Nothing. Last week these two did backstage interviews which didn't do much for me, and I wanted to see them talking in the ring in front of a crowd, so I'm glad that we got that here. Interesting crowd reactions, as Mercedes had a very split reaction, whereas Willow was getting a full babyface reaction. Willow cut a great babyface promo, and Mercedes' promo wasn't bad either, but it was still a bit of a WWE-ish kind of promo. I don't really know how to explain it, and I couldn't tell if she's trying to be a face or a heel, but at least to me, it seemed like she was leaning towards heel, and with the reaction she was getting with a split reaction from the crowd and how over Willow is, I'm hoping AEW go full heel with Mercedes Moné. Regardless, this segment ends with Willow Nightingale powerbombing Mercedes through the table for a huge pop, a great moment and end to the segment. I am buzzing for this match. Anyway, it's main event time, as is Dax Harwood versus Kazuchika Okada, and this match was good. I was maybe hoping for a little more, but I get they've got a big match next week and they don't need to go all out. But it was a good paced match, great sequences throughout the match, and a really great finishing sequence too, a really smart finishing sequence after Okada grabbed his belt, then chucked it away to distract the referee, who went to retrieve it, then a low blow and a rainmaker, and the win for Okada is picked up. After the match, we of course get Danielson and Cass jumping the ring after there was a post-match beatdown, AEW trademark, and the numbers game gets to them from the Bucks and Okada, but in comes Darby Allin and he takes out everyone, and he will be the new 4th man for Team AEW in Anarchy in the Arena, and that's how we close the show. Okay, where do we begin? Because I love Darby Allin, but should he be in this match? He just broke his ankle and got hit by a bus, and he himself, post-show, said that he's not 100%. Yeah man, he does not need to be rushed back for this. Do any other wrestler on the stacked roster. Why not just get Ricky Starks or Rey Fenix or someone like that? Any of them could fit into Team AEW. Overall though, decent Dynamite. I don't actually think it was good as last week's Dynamite. I enjoyed last week's Dynamite more than this week's, but it was a solid show, good builder to Double or Nothing, and I'm hoping for a strong go-home show, but AEW I feel like aren't very known for having strong go-home shows. Last night's AEW Dynamite was cursed. So much weird stuff happened, and I just need to discuss it. This show is of course the go-home show to Double or Nothing 2024, and as I said, it was probably one of the weirdest, craziest, and most cursed AEW Dynamites ever. So like the video and let's talk about it. Let's talk about the May 22nd, 2024 AEW Dynamite. We open the show with tag team action as it's Orange Cassidy and Will Ospreay versus Trent Beretta and Roderick Strong. These are just 4 of your most solid TV guys that can wrestle every week and always do a good job. And this match is obviously combining 2 feuds into one match, and it was a solid match between all 4 guys here. It went how you'd expect it to go. Obviously they held back just a bit because they're all facing at the pay-per-view obviously, and Roddy and Trent pick up the win after Wardlow got involved and Roderick Strong got the pin on Orange Cassidy. Then we get a big post-match beatdown as the Undisputed Kingdom strike Ospreay with the belt and bust him open, and Roddy cuts a promo as he holds a bloody Will Ospreay. This match ought to be a good one at Double or Nothing, but as for Orange Cassidy and Trent, I have no idea what the direction of that feud even is anymore. If Orange Cassidy is the heel or the babyface, I guess we'll find out in this match at Double or Nothing. We then get an EVP interlude, which is now a regular fixture of any AEW Dynamite show, and this one shows them handing out photos of Darby Allin, who's banned from the building, and they instruct Sonjay Dutt to hurt Bryan Danielson tonight, who is of course facing Satnam Singh in the main event, but we'll get there later though. We then get an in-ring promo from Trios champions the Bang Bang Gang, and they start talking about Pac, who then appears on the big screen, and he says that 3-on-1 isn't fair, is it? And then appears out alongside Penta and Phoenix as Death Triangle, and the Bang Bang Gang brawl, with Death Triangle getting the upper hand, and Pac gets on the mic and says see you at Double or Nothing. This is a good addition to the card. I think we all saw this coming, with Pac having his feud with Jay White, just the natural direction. Next up though, we have an FTW Eliminator 3-way match as it's Hook, Brian Keith and Katsuyori Shibata facing off, with the winner getting a shot at Chris Jericho's FTW title at Double or Nothing. And I was kinda disappointed by this match. It went very short for a 3-way match and I thought it wasn't memorable at all really, and the match ends with Hook and Shibata both tapping out Brian Keith at the same time, and it's then announced that they both won the match and will both be facing Jericho for the FTW title at the pay-per-view in a 3-way match. So basically just the same match they just had, but with Jericho instead of Brian Keith, which is a downgrade, to be honest. Jericho then cuts a promo and he was just waffling in this one. This was not a good promo from him. I said his ones from previous weeks weren't bad, but I'm not giving that same leeway for this one. This one just wasn't good. And I'm thinking that this leads to Brian Keith joining the Learning Tree. I said that last week, because if not, he kinda got jobbed out here. Next up though is Konosuke Takeshita and Matt Sydal facing one-on-one, and listen, I get that this match was just to make Takeshita look good, so it didn't need any time, but I like Matt Sydal as well personally. He's a good wrestler, good worker, and these two could have had a good match, but instead Takeshita just squashes him in under 2 minutes. Which again, Takeshita looks strong and Sydal's not a major player, so he can take the loss. There's no major booking issues at all, but these two could cook with more time, and I personally want to see that, but overall it's not an issue. Takeshita then continues to attack Sydal after the bell, but then we get our usual AEW trademark post-match beatdown and save angle as Jon Moxley's music hits and he comes out to make the save and hits Takeshita with the mic and says see you at Double or Nothing. World Champion Swerve Strickland is out next and he's facing Nick Wayne from the Patriarchy, and I'm glad they did this match. It felt natural to have this match in the build to Swerve versus Christian, and of course Swerve and Wayne have their own history, and so I'm glad that they got this match on the Go Home show. They had a solid match. It went just over 8 minutes and it wasn't an all-out match because this is surely going to be revisited again. I mean, Nick Wayne is 18, so they've got plenty of time, and perhaps it could be on an even bigger event. But Swerve of course picks up the win, then immediately is attacked by Killswitch, and out comes the Patriarchy. Swerve manages to clear kill switch though, and he sets his sight on Christian, who then runs away and is chased out of the arena. He then steals a car and looks to drive away, but is blocked by another car, which is being driven by the returning Prince Nana, and Swerve and Cage brawl on the car, with Swerve hitting a DDT on him on the car before Cage finally retreats. This entire angle was just absolute craziness, but I've come to expect nothing less when it comes to Christian Cage. Next up though is Kyle O'Reilly versus Malachi Black in, get this, Malachi Black's first Dynamite singles match since June 2022. I could be wrong, but I've looked on Cage Match and I think I'm correct. He's done single stuff on Collision and Rampage recently, but as far as I'm aware, it's been nearly 2 years since a singles match on Dynamite until now. And Malachi and Kyle O'Reilly had the match of the night for me. Lots of kickboxing and MMA elements to this match, sequences and striking. It was a big strike fest from start to finish, a big focus on the kicks and punches and forearms and knees and everything related to that. The fans were really into it as well, and I was also really into it. I enjoyed it, and the finish was cool as well, as Malachi ate a strike from O'Reilly to hit the end kick and pick up the win in this match over Kyle O'Reilly. And then right after this match, some absolute cursed bullshit started happening as red lights started to flicker and Malachi Black is hosed with blood from the ceiling. And I mean, it was literally shot at him at a crazy high pressure, like it was a power hose or something. And Copeland then appears on the Tron to speak to Malachi, who is now Malachi Red, and he says, "Malachi, be careful what you wish for. See you soon." Potentially a Brood Adam Copeland version at Double or Nothing, maybe a Gangrel appearance. That would be quite nice. Maybe we could see that. Tag action next, as it's Harley Cameron and Saraya against Toni Storm and Mariah May. And one thing I've noticed recently with the AEW Women's Division booking is there's more TV storylines going on, like matches and series of matches that start and end on TV, or a storyline that starts and ends on TV in more simplistic terms. And they've had Team Tony versus the Outcast like we've got here going on for the last few weeks. We've reviewed all the matches. Then you've also got Statlander and Willow having their own struggles and storyline, and then you also have Deonna Purrazzo and Thunder Rosa also doing their own stuff. It's good to see there's a lot more of a focus, and the women's division is definitely being booked a lot better now. But still, there's room for improvement, definitely. And like I said, I've seen all the matches they've had for this series with Team Toni Storm and the Outcast, and they've all been really solid, and this one was also a really solid match. I thought all four of them performed well together, and it was clear watching this match that they worked on this match. Mariah May and Harley Cameron, when they were in the ring working against each other, were easily the best moments of this match, and of course Mariah and Toni get the win in a very solid match after Toni gives both Saraya and Harley Cameron Storm Zeros. Serena Deeb then attacks all the crew with a chair post-match and locks Toni in a half crab with the chair as the refs do nothing to try to stop it, and Toni is tapping before Serena finally lets go. And this match between Toni Storm and Serena Deeb has been built up really well. They've had something to further the storyline every week on Dynamite, and I'm looking forward to this match. Anyway, it's main event time, as it's the one I've been waiting for, Bryan Danielson versus Satnam Singh. Happy birthday to Danielson, who celebrates with this match, and I was looking forward to this match the moment it got announced because it's just a crazy match on paper, but I know that Bryan Danielson is going to give Satnam Singh the best match of his career, and he sure as hell did. I really enjoyed this match. I've actually seen some split opinion on it, but I really enjoyed this match, and it was definitely Satnam Singh's best match of his career so far. It was a simple story, David versus Goliath, little versus big, as Danielson chopped at the wood all match and worked to take the big man down all match and was working and using his speed. Danielson, just a joy to watch when he's just running back and forth, just charging at a guy twice the size of him. Unfortunately though, this match only ended up going 5 minutes, which was my only downside of this match. Also a DQ finish after Sonjay attacked Danielson, which I don't think needed to be done, but it makes sense storyline wise as Sonjay was told to hurt Danielson, which they definitely did, and this post-match angle is just absolutely wild, as Danielson gets a comeback going and smashes the guitar over Satnam, who then just eats it, and the beatdown continues before the EVPs come out, and we're left with Danielson and the Young Bucks, who go for the EVP trigger, but Danielson moves out the way and clears the Young Bucks. Okada's music then hits, but it's only a distraction as Jack Perry attacks Bryan from behind. The Elite then drag Danielson up the ramp, but Darby Allin then finally arrives. He's been banned all night, and he pulls in wielding a flamethrower and backs the Elite away before chucking Nicholas through a table, and what a crazy post-match angle this is, as the show ends with Bryan Danielson and Darby Allin standing tall. And yeah, I think I know what match is main eventing Double or Nothing now. Honestly, what a crazy show from start to finish, from the blood to everything surrounding the main event, to Swerve and Christian Cage's angle. It was a crazy show, and the first hour was pretty bad, but I thought the show picked up in the second hour, as the second hour was really solid, and the show really picked up. Like I said, match-wise, it was a good show overall, other than the squash with Takeshita and Seidel, and the three-way match wasn't good, and the show was a bit cursed angle-wise, but it was an okay, it was an alright, it was a just above average go-home show leading up to Double or Nothing. I personally enjoyed it, but it wasn't that great with the angles, and the first hour was a bit meh. AEW Double or Nothing 2024 took place last night, and it may very well have been the most chaotic AEW show in history. So let's just get straight into it, no wasting time. Just like the video right now, and let's recap AEW Double or Nothing 2024. Alright, let's start with a very quick recap of the buy-in, as we open the show on the buy-in with Thunder Rosa and Deonna Purrazzo continuing on with their feud. I'm glad this match got to be a part of the show, and I think this was one of the best buy-in matches in recent history that I can remember. It was a good match between the two, and it set up for the trilogy to finish off the feud between these two, as Deonna won the match with a flash pinfall finish, holding on to the ropes, and got the dusty finish, and we're definitely getting a third match between these two. We then had the Acclaimed and Daddy Ass versus Cage of Agony, which is Brian Cage and the Gates of Agony's new name. I did not watch this match. I have no idea who won it. I really couldn't care less about it. And after that, Tony Khan came out with Martha Hart, and they announced the Owen Hart tournaments for this year, which this year will see the winners get world title shots at All In, both for the men's and women's world titles. Very interesting. I'll give my early predictions later on. For now though, we open the main show with William Ospreay and Roderick Strong. I don't know why I call him his full name there, but this match was a great way to open the show. We start off with a very scary spot where the ref was distracted, and Matt Taven comes in and hits the ropes right in front of the ref, which kind of annoyed me, and hits a very gnarly but scary spot as he delivers a lariat to Ospreay, who was on the shoulders of Mike Bennett outside, and Ospreay nearly died off that spot probably, but he was fine. He was so chill about it, kept going forward and kept up with the high spots and the crazy pace of this match. Just a perfect styles clash as Ospreay kept up the speed and Roderick Strong would slow it down with his brutal backbreakers and impact moves. Undisputed Kingdom are ejected after Wardlow gets involved, and Ospreay hurts Strong, and it looks to be a ref stoppage, which means no title win, and Ospreay is conflicted whether to hurt him or not and continue the match and get the win clean to win the title, but Callis gets in his ear and Ospreay follows and goes for the Tiger Driver, but hesitates and can't do it as Roddy takes advantage and hits his finisher for a huge near fall. Ospreay then reverses, hits the Hidden Blade, and then hits the Stormbreaker to win the AEW International title. I'm actually surprised by the result of this match. Ospreay being champ is a good thing, but poor Roddy being a transitional champ, he doesn't deserve that, but this was a good match regardless. Adam Cole then comes out post-match, which is strange timing, but okay. He gets on the mic and says who's ready for story time with Adam Cole. He talks about his injury and how his life has been hell for the last few months, and he holds a devil mask up as MJF chants "Reign in," and Adam goes to hit his pose, and the lights go out, and on the Tron appears a very mysterious video showing a first-person POV walking through seemingly what looks like MJF's manor house. And of course, then out comes MJF, a huge pop for Maxwell as he's got unfinished business with Adam Cole. Adam Cole tried to hug it out with him, which kind of made no sense to me for him to try do that, and him and MJF do hug before MJF kicks him square in the dick and hits a brain buster. He gets on the mic and calls Adam Cole a noodle-armed bobblehead and starts cutting a promo of his own and talks about his relationship with Adam Cole and everything relating to them, and reintroduces himself to the fans, as well as saying he doesn't need a New Japan or a Vince McMahon, and he hits an elbow drop on the Devil Mask and chucks it into the crowd and pretty much announces that he's resigned with AEW. I mean, no shit. And welcome back MJF, he looks shredded and it's great to see him back as he's back to his old self and the wholesome MJF is dead. Next up for the trios titles we had Bang Bang Gang versus Death Triangle, and this was just your classic trios action, mayhem on all corners. Death Triangle back to their regular form. It's great to see them on pay-per-view once again. Being real though, I was eating during this match, so I wasn't paying attention. Yes, I know I'm a bad YouTuber, but at least I'm being honest here. But it was good from what I saw, and Juice Robinson returned to get the assist for Jay White to hit the Blade Runner on Pac to get the win, and the Bang Bang Gang retain, and Juice Robinson seemingly back from injury now. Good to see him. Next up we then have Toni Storm versus Serena Deeb for the Women's World title. This was a really well built up match. Throughout all the Dynamite episodes I've been reviewing, Serena has been built up really well as a babyface. However, unfortunately tonight, the reactions from the crowd didn't reflect that, as the crowd just loved Toni Storm too much. For me, this was one of the best timeless Toni Storm matches so far in AEW since the timeless gimmick became a part of Toni Storm. A great back and forth bout between the two, very hard hitting. Serena Deeb was punishing the knee throughout the match, and at one point she has a big submission hold locked in on Toni Storm's knee, and Mariah May tries to throw the towel in, but Luther grabs it off her, and Toni Storm escapes the submission, and then sees Luther holding the towel, and thinks that he was about to do it. There's definitely some stories being told with Mariah May here, who is definitely winning the Owen Hart Cup to challenge Toni at Wembley, by the way. That's my first prediction. Serena kicks out of the Storm Zero and hits her finisher on the apron and then in the ring again, but Toni still kicks out. What will it take to put one of these women away? Well, only a Storm Zero from the middle rope into another Storm Zero for Toni Storm to get the win and retain the title. And her and Mariah are completely cool, but we saw what we saw. Don't do my boy Luther like that. Trent versus Orange Cassidy is up next. The first thing to point out is that Orange Cassidy comes back out to Where Is My Mind by Pixies. I hope that's his permanent theme song again. I'm not sure it will be though, but fingers crossed because I love that song. It's a big brawl to start out, but then it just slowed right down and they just started having a normal wrestling match, which really didn't suit the feud. It should have been a brawl here. Their Dynamite match was that. It was a brawl, and the Dynamite match should have been this match, and this match should have been the match on Dynamite. They got these two matches the wrong way round. Orange Cassidy picks up the win with a flash pinfall, a finish that only makes me think this story is continuing, probably with a big stipulation blow-off, as Trent leaves in anger saying he's done, shoving away Rocky Romero and refusing questions from Renee Paquette. I wonder what's next. Next up, it's three-way action. It's FTW rules. It's Hook, Shibata, and Chris Jericho for the FTW title. And right from the get-go of this match, they were just bullying Chris Jericho. First, they took it in turns to throw him into dice that they rolled all over across the ring. The ring was just covered in dice throughout the match. They bullied him with kendo sticks. And then there was a botched table spot as Shibata looked to hit a Death Valley driver to Hook on Jericho, who's lying on the table. And while it was a brutal spot, the table didn't break, but it then gets set up in the corner quickly, with Shibata throwing Jericho through it, then drop kicking him as he sat in the debris. Hook kicks out the codebreaker, then locks in the red drum, and Jericho looks to be about to tap, but Big Bill steps in to stop it, and he looks to chokeslam Hook through a table on the outside, but Hook hits an awesome T-bone suplex to Big Bill through the table, a sick spot that almost damn near impaled Big Bill. Meanwhile, in the ring, Jericho locks in the walls on Shibata, but Shibata reverses into the figure 4, and Hook then gets the red drum locked in as well, but a mystery man comes in and takes out Hook and Shibata with a trash can, and the masked man is none other than Brian Keith. Just as I predicted in my AEW review last Wednesday, it looks like he's joined the learning tree. Hook throws Brian Keith out of the ring, but turns around into a Judas effect, and Jericho then pins Shibata to win. I actually can't hate on this match other than the result. It still makes sense storyline-wise because at least Brian Keith came in to cost them the win. But I can't hate on this match because the crowd were into it by the end after starting out quiet, and I'm a fiend for hardcore wrestling. I love matches like these. I thought it was a good match, I can't lie. We had Jon Moxley and Konosuke Takeshita. These guys really did have the match that Trent and Orange Cassidy should have had, I think. It was a wild brawl all over the ringside area and in the ring. They were brawling all over the place. And Konosuke Takeshita just completely dominated this match for a big chunk of this match, just hitting move after move after move on Moxley, who's just kicking out and getting near falls. And Konosuke Takeshita is just absolutely destroying Jon Moxley. Takeshita goes to get some chairs out, and while the ref was clearing the ring, Moxley hits a stomp to Takeshita onto the chair out of nowhere for the finish, and he sneaks the victory in a brutal way. It was an alright match, but this did nothing for Takeshita in the end, man. He came out of this just looking really poor. The fact he wasn't able to get the win after dominating the match, and the fact that Mox got the win despite it being an eliminator, like, what was the point of all of this? Either way, next up is Malachi versus Adam Copeland for the TNT Championship. It's a barbed wire steel cage match, but I must have got the wrong misconception. I must have got the wrong idea, because I thought barbed wire steel cage was entirely made out of barbed wire, like a steel cage entirely made out of barbed wire. But no, it's just the top so that they can't climb out, but we saw that ended up being a non-factor later on anyway. This is Malachi's first singles title match, I believe, don't quote me on that, and also his first singles pay-per-view match since Cody. We get the Brood entrance for Adam Copeland, but no Gangrel, and we get straight into the match as within minutes, Malachi is already gigging, already bleeding, and the two lads are exchanging turns with weapons like a barbed wire bat and table spots going on with sunset flips, and they're exchanging finishes very early on as well, as Malachi looked to hit the end kick but is speared out of nowhere for a big near fall. Then, in probably one of the craziest wrestling spots I've seen in recent memory, Copeland sets up Black on another table, wraps around in barbed wire to hook him to the table, and then climbs all the way to the top of the cage and hits an elbow drop to Black through the table, and Cope landed so badly, like literally feet first. I thought his ACLs were finished, I thought his knees were finished, I thought his spine must have been finished, but he was completely fine. He really undershot that though and seemed to hesitate in the air, realizing just how crazy this spot is. All that just for a 2 count anyway. Malachi then reverses the spear into another end kick for another near fall, and okay, now this match is going on for a bit too long. They're really kicking out of a lot right now. They then go outside and brawl, which leads to the House of Black coming out, and they look like they're gonna swerve and join up with Cope, but then they attack him. It's a double swerve. The House of Black look to destroy Cope in the ring, but the lights go red and out comes Gangrel from underneath the ring, and they all brawl. Gangrel is here, great pop for him, we wanted to see that, before Copeland catches Malachi with a spear and uses a barbed wire crown in a crossface, and Malachi passes out. Copeland wins. What a match, what a finish. Cope's reign has been amazing. His AEW run as a whole has just been great. He's really been working. And this match did go on a tad too long for me, but it had everything in it, and it was a perfect way to end this feud. But next up, it's the first of the triple main event, as they did a slot machine gimmick to determine which of the triple main event was on, which I'm guessing was worked, and it very much seemed it, as it's Mercedes Moné versus Willow Nightingale for the TBS title. We get a special Mercedes entrance with an inspirational video package and neon drummers and dancers, and the crowd are hot for this match from the start. There's dueling chants, and the first thing I noticed is that it seemed like Mercedes was working like a heel, but that kind of changed throughout the match, which I didn't really understand. And this match did have its moments here and there, but it's Mercedes' first match back from a major injury that was thought to put her out, and to me, despite a couple of botches, she's not missed a beat. She looked really good out there, and Willow has obviously been on the form of her life. She's targeting Mercedes' injured knee throughout the match. She hits a sick pounce at one point, which got an insane sell from Mercedes, my favorite moment from the match. And Willow hits the powerbomb, but Stokely inadvertently distracts the ref, and so it's a near fall. Moné gets the crossface locked in, but Willow escapes, but shortly after, Moné hits the Moné Maker out of nowhere, which I can't lie, didn't look great, but it beats Willow, and she wins the TBS title on her debut match. Really good match here, not the best of the night, but a really good solid match, and a good debut for Mercedes and AEW. her as champ is really exciting. I'm interested to see where Willow goes from here as well, and it's time to start the Mercedes Moné versus Jamie Hayter at All In agenda. Post-match though, Statlander shoves Stokely and helps Willow out before smashing her against the ramp and beating the piss out of her, as Statlander and Stokely have turned on Willow, and it was predictable. We all saw this coming, but it was meant to happen. It was good that they did this, but what wasn't good is that they didn't let this breathe at all, and right like 5 seconds after the attack happened, they're cutting away to a video package. They didn't give this any time at all. It should have got some more focus and a bit more time to breathe, like I'm saying. But alas, there's definitely a lot more to come with this storyline. Next up though, it's our co-main event, as it's Swerve Strickland versus Christian Cage for the AEW World Championship. This is a match I watched the next day because I fell asleep before this match and the main event. This match was kinda in the death spot, but they did good, and the crowd weren't too hot for it, but they got a little more into it as it went on. And this went how you'd expect it, with all the shenanigans with the patriarchy and Prince Nana constantly getting involved and the brawling all around the ringside area. Classic AEW gang wars. They brawled on the outside, used weapons of course, and there were some brutal spots using the steps. But there was an awesome finishing sequence as well, as Swerve stomps Christian on the announce table, then in the ring reverses a spear into an awesome mid-air house call kick, hits the Swerve Stomp, then another house call kick, and gets the 1-2-3. These two guys made it work. It was a good match, and a good follower to the Mercedes Moné Willow Nightingale match, and a good precursor to what we're about to witness next. Anarchy in the arena, the Elite, the Young Bucks, Jack Perry, and Okada, of course, that is the Elite, up against Team AEW of Bryan Danielson, Dax Harwood, Cash Wheeler, and Darby Allin. So much happened in this match, I'm not even going to try put it into order of what time it happened, because just too much happened and I can't even begin to talk about it all. There's just so much. Started out in a funny way though when Danielson comes out to Final Countdown, but the EVPs cut it off because it cost 200k per use, but that didn't stop Darby Allin from hitting a coffin drop at the very climax of the song. Great timing. Jack Perry then hits Darby Allin with a bus like minutes into the match. Yes, I did just say that. He did hit Darby Allin with a bus. But Darby Allin gets one back when Jack Perry was later flamethrowered in return after he tried to hurt Tony Khan, who also gets involved in the match. But yes, buses and flamethrowers are involved in this match. Darby is then hung up above the ring from his ankle, just suspended there, as the Elite just destroy him and hit him with a thumbtack super kick to the exposed broken nose. Oh my word, that was brutal. And Danielson is left alone in the ring with the Elite, as Darby, like I said, was destroyed with the super kicks, and FTR had been taken out with an exploding chair courtesy of the Young Bucks. Danielson tries to fight the Elite off. He does an alright job, but he's taken out with a running knee and pinned by Jack Perry for the Elite to get the win in one of the craziest matches I've ever seen, and probably the most video game match I've ever seen ever. Yeah, I don't think any of these 8 guys surely are the same after this match. This match took years off of all these guys' lives, surely. It was just brutal. I'm being hyperbolic there, obviously, but this match was brutal. It was everything Anarchy in the arena and this blood feud needed to be. And just like that, Jack Perry has been established in a big way, getting this win here, and I can firmly hold my hands up and say I was wrong saying he ruined his own career, okay? It happens, it happens. It was just a title, okay? But overall, I'm rating this pay-per-view an 8 out of 10. The pros of this pay-per-view, there was good matches for the most part, top to bottom. This card was really solid. The MJF return was awesome to see, as well as Juice Robinson, him being back is brilliant to see as well. Mercedes and Ospreay being new champions is also really exciting, but that brings me to one of the cons, which is while Mercedes and Ospreay won, but at what cost was it? Because Willow and Roddy unfortunately ended up being only transitional champions, which they deserved to be more of, but I'm sure they'll get a chance to do more stuff in AEW, touch wood, hopefully. Of course, Willow has a lot of stuff going on with Chris Statlander, which should have got more focus on this show here as well. They cut away from that far too quickly, and another big con about this show, way too long. I went to bed about 4:30 in the morning, just before 5 in the morning, and there was still 2 matches to go, and those matches totaled like an hour, so I was never staying up for them. But that's just European problems, I guess. Either way, very, very good show here, very chaotic show, the most chaotic show in AEW history, I would say. The AEW Dynamite after Double or Nothing 2024 took place last night and a fair bit happened on the show, but AEW has also been met with some bad news recently and some drama has taken place recently too within the company, all of which we're going to discuss in this week's Dynamite review. So like the video and let's talk about it. Let's talk about the May 29th AEW Dynamite episode. Dynamite kicks off with the CEO and new TBS champion Mercedes Moné as it's her title win celebration. She gets on the mic, she says she's the greatest of all time and talks about the match with Willow, says Willow is great but she's too nice and anyone could have seen Statlander turning on her. Kinda true. Then Sky Blue appears on screen and she shows the footage of Mercedes being attacked during her interview from a few weeks ago, and it's revealed that Sky Blue was that mystery attacker all along, and Sky Blue then appears in the ring attacking Mercedes and posing with the belt before leaving, and it's announced later on in the show that we'll be seeing these two face off for the title tonight, which in turn got the Mariah May versus Saraya match, which was originally scheduled for tonight, postponed to next week, which Saraya didn't seem to be very happy about. She deleted a tweet saying that she's going to really start speaking her mind, which could easily be a storyline thing because she's been posting cryptic stuff after, or it's also possible that Bryan Danielson has been on her case and given her a fine. But regardless, Mariah May and Saraya is happening next week now, and it was announced during the broadcast of this show, so I guess any issue, if there was one, is resolved, or else Saraya is just playing into kayfabe doing this. Before our first match of the night, we have Swerve Strickland versus Killswitch, and this match is a Game of Thrones cross-promotional match thingy, and it was a nice way to open the show, and Swerve of course predictably gets the win. And don't get me wrong, like I said, it was a nice match, but can we start getting Swerve in the main event segments now? I have no issue with him wrestling as much as he does, but he's the world champion, he should be in the main event. And also, Killswitch shouldn't be kicking out of the world champion's finisher on a random Dynamite. Get out of here with that, with him kicking out the Swerve Stomp the way he did. Next up though, we have the first ever edition of TV time with the Learning Tree, and now, I'm not exaggerating, but I think this may have been one of the worst segments in AEW history. Just a truly WWE 2019, start of 2020, Roman Reigns, Baron Corbin, dog food era kind of segment. The kind of segment AEW just doesn't need on its programming, and Jericho, sure, he's being an annoying heel, but these promos, which are starting to sound the exact same every week, just aren't it. They bring out Brian Keith, who now appears to be in the Learning Tree, but I don't really know, and Hook then comes out and it looks like he's going to start beating them up, but he is stopped by Samoa Joe, who whispers something in his ear and walks him backstage. It looks like the Hook Jericho storyline still going on, and maybe Samoa Joe has been dragged into it now, which we definitely didn't need to happen, and Joe doesn't need to happen. For our next match of the night, it's Jon Moxley versus Rocky Romero in a title eliminator match for the IWGP Heavyweight title. And listen, I like both of these guys, and this match was fine, but I don't really get how Rocky Romero has earned a title eliminator match. He loses every match he's in, he's pretty much a jobber on AEW TV, and also this match didn't need to go as long as it did. I'm a firm believer that not every TV match needs to be 10 minutes plus. You can have some matches on there that are just a 5 to 8 minute banger, and this match could have easily been that, and maybe should have been that. Regardless, this match was fine. Moxie got the win. It's nothing to write home about. It happened. Don Callis is out next though, and he is out to recruit Orange Cassidy to the family, and Orange Cassidy comes out, but he declines the offer to join Don Callis' family and rips up the contract instead, which was a surprise as this has been teased for so long. But Stokely and Chris Statlander then come out, and Chris Statlander says that her best friend does accept the offer, and that leads Trent to come in and attack Orange from behind, and he signs to join the Don Callis family. An interesting development, but I have to say, I really don't know what Don Callis managing Trent really does for anyone. But we're here now, I guess. We're here now with it, and looks like we're rolling with it. The Don Callis family is now made up of Kyle Fletcher, Powerhouse Hobbs, Konosuke Takeshita, Trent Beretta, and is Will Ospreay even still like technically part of it? I don't even know. And Sammy Guevara was in there for like a month too. Just a weird group. Sky Blue versus Mercedes Moné for the TBS title is up next, and these two had a really good match here. One of the best matches of the night, probably the second best match of the night behind the main event, which we'll get to. But I think this was a good first defense and also a really good way to introduce Mercedes Moné to the core AEW women's division. Sky Blue is a big part of the AEW women's division. She's a core member of the AEW women's division, someone who's not ex-WWE. She's AEW through and through. So it's good to see Mercedes mixing it up with people she's never wrestled before, and I think these two had chemistry. While it wasn't as good as the match against Willow on pay-per-view, obviously, it was less botchy and probably one of, if not Sky's best matches ever, as she puts up a good fight, but Mercedes gets the win with the Monet Maker, which looks a lot better here than it did at Double or Nothing. Post-match though, CMLL star and New Japan Strong Women's Champion Stephanie Vaquer comes out and stares down Mercedes Moné. There was a video package hyping up Stephanie Vaquer earlier in the show, and now it looks like we might be getting these two against each other at Forbidden Door. These two of course have faced before, if you didn't know, on New Japan Strong, and maybe this could be for both belts, but time will tell. But I think we can presume that this match is at least happening. The Elite are out next, and immediately off the gate there's CM Punk chants, which Okada shuts down by saying "shut up bitches," and they announce that Adam Copeland has been stripped of the TNT title and the TNT title is now vacant, which of course is happening because Copeland recently announced that he was injured off of that steel cage dive that he did at Double or Nothing, which no shit did that injure him. The guy landed feet first from like a 20-foot drop, and it's really unfortunate news because Copeland has been having a great run in AEW and a great TNT title run, and now it looks as though he's going to have to miss out on Wembley, which is just such a shame. The Elite then start to announce what they're going to do with the championship, and they announce that they're going to be rewarding the title to Jack Perry, and just as they're about to announce him as an new, Christopher Daniels comes out and he announces that he is the newly elected interim EVP and that Jack Perry isn't getting the title just like that, and there will be qualifier matches to determine the next TNT champion. The Elite look as though they're going to attack Christopher Daniels, but the Acclaimed and Daddy Ass come out to even the odds, and the 8 men stare each other down. It looks as though we've got a nice TV program for these guys to sink their teeth into against some AEW originals. It makes sense, as long as this isn't a pay-per-view program, which I doubt it is. I think it's just made for TV, which it suits. I think we're all good here. Anyway, main event time, as it's the Casino Gauntlet match, and this was just as good as the first Casino Gauntlet match. I think AEW have found a good, original stipulation match here. This match featured AEW, New Japan, and CMLL guys as Pac and Jay White started off, and as the match went on, we'd see Mystico, Will Ospreay, Shota Umino, Claudio Castagnoli, Lio Rush, which was a genuine pretty big surprise given how him and AEW fell out before, Orange Cassidy, and Heshi Chero. A great lineup, and we get the high spots, the multi-man spots, and some great sequences. I especially loved Claudio and Lio Rush when they were going at it. I thought they had a really cool sequence. And also the ending sequence with Ospreay and Cassidy, where Ospreay gets the win, was also great. And yeah, like I just said there, Ospreay gets the win here, and as a result, he's going to be facing Swerve Strickland at Forbidden Door for the world title. I'm very surprised they're doing this. I'm not against it at all, I'm just very surprised. AEW usually like to hold off on doing big matches like these immediately, and they wait a bit, and a lot of the time because of that, they miss out on the opportunity to do these matches when they're at their most hot. So I am completely fine with them just doing this match, and to be honest, I don't think this is going to be the only match. I reckon this could easily be a best of 3, especially as Ospreay is the international champion and this match is only for the world championship. Maybe we could see a best of 3 that ends in a unification match, which was actually an idea I had a few weeks ago to unify these belts, which they might actually be doing now, which really surprises me. But yeah, regardless, I'm very surprised they didn't wait to Wembley to do this. But I have a feeling we still see this at Wembley. I'm very much looking forward to this match between these two men at Forbidden Door. Overall though, Dynamite was pretty average. I'd give it a 6 to maybe a 6.5 out of 10. The first hour wasn't great, the learning tree stuff wasn't very good, it had the Mox versus Romero match, which wasn't really anything special, as well as Swerve versus Killswitch, which was okay, but didn't really need to be happening. Whereas the second hour for me was very, very solid. The Elite segment was good, Mercedes and Sky absolutely killed it, and the Casino Gauntlet was a really great main event once again. The second hour very much carrying this show this time round, and it's just an above average show this week, nothing to write home about. The June 5th AEW Dynamite has divided opinion amongst AEW fans, and after watching that show myself, I've got to say I am very surprised and very shocked by some of the booking decisions that were made on that show. And it was another strange episode of AEW Dynamite, so yeah man, just like the video and let's get straight into it. Let's talk about last night's AEW Dynamite. The show opens with MJF. He's back on Dynamite, his first appearance on TV in a few months. I don't really know why he wasn't on the show last week, but we've got him here now, so we'll take it. And he does a long promo to open the show, and I don't really know what to think of this entire segment. I don't think it was a bad promo to start with. It was just a generic 2023 MJF promo to start with, and he goes after Swerve and Ospreay and impersonating Will's accent and just doing classic MJF stuff. He's then interrupted by Roosh, who comes out and cuts a decent promo on MJF saying he also recently returned and he didn't get a celebration when he's been working much harder than MJF has. And MJF just responds by saying that he didn't get any of that, even though the promo was completely intelligible. And I think we might have a bit of a problem now with MJF because he obviously returned at Double or Nothing and said the wholesome MJF is gone and that he's back to just being a douchebag now, but he's still a babyface, and they need to find a balance with his promos where they can keep him that same vibe as before where he's just a total dick, but as a babyface. Like, how as fans are we supposed to respond to him saying what he said there? Like, surely Roosh does not look like the heel in this situation right now. MJF interrupts Roosh again to say nobody gives a shit and says he's the best in the world, which he said about a dozen times in this promo already, and Roosh charges the ring and the two brawl before they're both separated. And it looks like we may have another match for Forbidden Door here potentially, or it's just a TV feud for MJF to sink his teeth into. But yeah, a bit of a rough opening segment by the end of it. It feels like they're trying to capture the 29 to 2021 MJF but as a babyface, and I'm not sure how well that's gonna work. Anyway, the first match of the night is an international title 4-way contenders match, with the winner facing Will Ospreay for the title next week on Dynamite. It's Orange Cassidy, Kyle O'Reilly, Jay Lethal and Ray Fenix, a good lineup, but a guy like me would have put Angelico in here as well. Yeah man, a great opener here though, everyone put a shift in, and I think these are the kinds of matches that AEW should be doing on TV more often with the roster that they have. Just multi-man matches with guys who can go, because AEW is the matches promotion and these are matches you won't see anywhere else, so why not do them? Like I said, this was a strong opener and the crowd was super hot for this as well. In fact, they were hot for the entire show and for every match, and they really bought the show up. It looked as though Jay Lethal was going to pick up the win as he hits lethal injections on both O'Reilly and Cassidy and locks in the figure 4 on Fenix, but Fenix rolls him up and gets the 1-2-3, and he's facing Ospreay next week. That match is going to be absolutely mind-boggling. Post-match though, Callis and Trent come out and they look as though they're about to attack Orange Cassidy, but he grabs a chain and wraps it around his fist to back them away. Chris Statlander then comes into the ring and tells Cassidy to back off before socking him in the face with a right hook. Willow's music then hits and she's back and she clears the ring, and she looks as though she's got an alliance with Cassidy, as after the break she's interviewed and the two fist pump, and we're definitely getting a mixed tag team match soon. But before that, we actually had the first of 4 Learning Tree backstage segments today, and they were all pretty dreadful. Yes, there was 4 Learning Tree segments today throughout the entire show. Just dreadful, and they get worse every week because Jericho, whatever you criticize about these segments, he leans into it and tries to make it into some sort of inside joke, but it just doesn't land or hit at all. I'm not going to discuss these all individually in order, so let's just discuss them now. There was this one where they were arriving, and that's when it's found out that we'll be seeing them all throughout the show. He's then pestering people in catering. He then goes to pester Angelo Parker and Matt Menard, where there was actually a funny moment there where Brian Keith tells Angelo Parker to make sure the baby's a Jericho fan. And then they go and speak to Private Party, and he goes up to them and suggests they rename to Public Party, which is actually pretty funny, but it's delivered by Jericho in the most cringe and unbearable way possible. And they then invite the Private Party for TV time with the Learning Tree next week, which was received so well when they did it last week, so why not do it again so soon? We all want to see that, totally. Obviously, I'm being sarcastic. I don't know why they're doing one of these segments again so soon, and I really hope this is a feud for the Private Party rather than them just being shoved into the Jericho stable. And I've got a really bad feeling about it because Private Party have been in random stable limbo from the day they got into AEW. Next up though, we have a surprise match announced by Christopher Daniels, as it's Mark Briscoe versus Brian Cage, with the winner getting added to the TNT title ladder match at Forbidden Door. And this match started out really slow, and during the first act of this match, I thought this was probably a waste of a Dynamite spot. The crowd weren't really that hot for it either to begin with, but the match really picked up, and in the second act the crowd really got into it, and by the end of the third act and the end of the match, this was my match of the night, and these two guys were really working. Great work from both guys here, as Mark Briscoe of course picks up the win, with Jack Perry and Takeshita both looking on. We get Renee backstage with Samoa Joe and Hook, but they are interrupted by the Premier Athletes, and Joe holds back Hook, who wants to attack them, but Joe says they'll handle it in their own time. Looks like we've got a tag match coming up soon, player. We then get the Acclaimed coming out, and Max starts rapping about the EVPs, but they are cut off by said EVPs who appear on the Tron and say to check the AEW employee handbook, as it clearly says do not disparage your EVPs, and they announce that the Acclaim segment has been cut tonight. This is the kind of stuff I'm really liking with the EVPs at the moment, where they're really blurring the lines with the way they abuse their powers. It's unique stuff. We get an interview with Swerve hyping up his match with Roderick Strong, which is main eventing tonight, as it should be, because the world champion should always be the main event. Apparently now that's a hot take, but we go straight into the Blackpool Combat Club versus Team CMLL 8-man tag team match, as Wheeler Yuta is back, and representing Team CMLL, we've got S-Finge, Magnus, Rugido, and Volador Jr. Please excuse any pronunciation I did wrong there, but this was a really fun 8-man tag. The only issue was that it was obviously quite predictable how it was going to go, and that is of course with Blackpool Combat Club getting the win, with Wheeler Yuta picking up the win in his return match. And I really wonder what Blackpool Combat Club's plans are heading into Forbidden Door. For me personally, I'd really love to see a luchador join the group. It would add a new style of wrestler to the group, and I think we're overdue the Blackpool Combat Club expanding and adding some more members. We then see the Acclaimed and the EVPs backstage as security are holding the Acclaimed back. We're definitely getting some more stuff with these guys in the future. And then the EVPs are speaking to the patriarchy, as Christian Cage is stating his case for how he deserves another title shot, and the Bucks said they'll see what they can do, and we'll scratch your backs if you continue to scratch ours. Next up though is Saraya versus Mariah May. This match was obviously meant to happen last week, but it was postponed from last week's show, and at first people thought that Saraya was really pissed about this, but it seems as though that was all just a work. These two had a really nice match. It wasn't my favourite of the series of matches that the Outcasts and Team Timeless have had for the past few weeks on Dynamite, but it was good stuff, and once again the crowd was super hot for it. However, what was shocking was the finish of this match, which saw Saraya locking in the Page tap out. Yes, I still call it that because I don't know what she calls it now. And Mariah May submitting, with Saraya winning clean. And people were very angry about this. Obviously, a lot of people online don't like Saraya, and people were saying the booking doesn't make sense here. And while don't get me wrong, I was very shocked that Saraya won, especially clean, it does make sense for the story, especially given the angle we had afterwards with Mina Shirakawa coming out and Toni Storm both tending to Mariah May at the same time, helping set up for their match, which was made official for Forbidden Door. Like I said, I was definitely shocked to see Saraya win. I doubt they do anything with Saraya off of this, like give her a title shot or something like that. Maybe they could. And this was more of just a story device for what I believe is going to be Toni versus Mariah at Wembley. We then get a backstage interview with Bryan Danielson, where he talks about how this is his last year in wrestling full time, and it hasn't gone as planned, as he's lost every big match he's been in, but that Wheeler Yuta's return has him fired up, and that there's still time to make this final year count, and so he announces himself for the Owen Hart tournament as he wants the world title at Wembley. I would not be unhappy with Bryan Danielson and Swerve Strickland main eventing Wembley. How could you be? And speaking of world title, the main event is Swerve Strickland versus Roderick Strong for the AEW world title, a match that caught a lot of flack just for being booked, even though it makes perfect sense story-wise, and there's nothing wrong with being a fighting champion. Yeah, I really don't get it, but this match was obviously great. I'll repeat myself once more by saying the crowd was super alive and hot for this match. It was a really good main event here, and the types of matches that Swerve should be having as champion, unlike the Kill Switch match last week. Great work from these two, Roderick Strong doing his usual, targeting the back and hitting all kinds of backbreakers and just being the absolute sickest guy. But Swerve, of course, picks up the win with a Swerve Stomp and a house call to retain the title, and that is how we close the show. Overall, this episode of Dynamite was really weird, like I said. I'm gonna give it, though, a 7.25 out of 10. I'd probably say about that range. It's not a 7 out of 10, not quite, but also not quite a 7.5, so I'd say 7.25. All the matches really delivered. The crowd were amazing for this show. They bought up everything in this show. I thought Briscoe and Cage was match of the night. However, the cons of this show was that MJF promo was not a great way to open the show for me, and all the Chris Jericho segments just didn't hit in the slightest. But other than that, I saw a lot of stories getting told tonight, lots of setup for Forbidden Door, and it was a solid episode of Dynamite outside of all of the Jericho and MJF shenanigans. There was also a really good video package with Daniel Garcia that I forgot to mention, going over injuries he's overcame to become a wrestler and how he broke both his legs in 2019 and maybe wasn't going to be able to walk again. These are video packages for wrestlers that we need more of in AEW because they make you care, and I already liked Daniel Garcia, but this makes me like him even more as a fan, and I want to see more Garcia now. Overall, decent show, just a bit of weirdness in decision making in regards to MJF and what they're doing with his character with Jericho and Saraya beating Mariah May, which while I wasn't against that, it was definitely a shocking and weird decision. We may have just seen one of the most eventful and chaotic AEW shows of 2024, and there was also a huge announcement, but with that announcement came a very questionable decision, and we'll talk about all that and more in today's AEW Dynamite review, so like the video and let's get straight into it. The show opens with Swerve Strickland and Prince Nana coming out to cut a promo. He discusses Ospreay and his match with him at Forbidden Door, but quickly changes the subject by saying he respects Ospreay because he's a fighting champion, unlike the EVPs who haven't defended their titles at all since winning them. And this of course leads to the Elite coming out. Okada on the mic says, "Whose house? It's my house, bitch." And Nicholas Jackson gets on the mic and he says that because wrestlers in the back still doubt the EVPs despite all their victories, they challenge AEW's best in a blood and guts match. So pretty crazy and major announcement there, and quite out of nowhere with this segment, but I'm all for it, of course I am. The Elite look to attack Swerve, but out comes the Acclaimed and Daddy Ass to even the odds. Surely Blood and Guts isn't gonna be the Elite versus Swerve, the Acclaimed, and Daddy Ass, right? Surely it can't be that. Daniels comes out though and tells them to pack it in, and that Jack Perry's match with Dustin Rhodes begins right now. We'll discuss the potential candidates for the Blood and Guts match later on. Jack and Dustin Rhodes had a nice match here. It's always nice to see Dustin Rhodes on Dynamite. We don't see him as much on this show as we used to back in 2019-2020 era. And like I said, these guys worked well, had an alright TV match. Dustin Rhodes gigs in this match about 3 minutes in for some reason, and unsurprisingly Jack Perry gets the win, and he's now in the TNT title ladder match at Forbidden Door, and maybe a favourite to win that match. Roosh is out next, and he comes out to face some random jobber that I didn't even catch his name. Roosh of course destroys him in just over a minute, and Roosh gets on the mic and calls the jobber a typical American and looks to do more damage, but out comes MJF, and the two begin brawling and brawling and brawling and brawling, and they brawl all the way to the back, and this goes on for ages. They break tables, they're hitting their heads into walls, and it takes every backstage agent and jobber to break this up. It was a long brawl, it was an awesome brawl, and getting MJF off the mic this week was a nice change of pace, and Roosh and MJF are facing off next week on Dynamite to open the show. I'm surprised it's not at Forbidden Door, so I'm interested to see what MJF does do at Forbidden Door. Anyway, next up is a trios match as it's Roderick Strong, Kyle Fletcher, and Konosuke Takeshita against Kyle O'Reilly, Orange Cassidy, and Mark Briscoe. Right before this, there was an interview with the baby faces where Mark Briscoe cut the promo of his life, just a brilliant promo, and got the crowd super rallied up for this match, and this was a fun trios match. Every guy put a shift in, crowd were hot for it. There was the usual Trent and Orange Cassidy antics with Trent and Callis at ringside. Yawn. I'm getting a bit bored of this every week. Can we blow off this feud already between Trent and Orange? And the heels get the win after Takeshita and Fletcher double teamed Mark Briscoe, and Fletcher pinned him after a pile driver off a Takeshita knee strike. Trent comes straight in after the match and starts beating up Cassidy, and Willow Nightingale's music hits, but she doesn't come out until eventually she's dragged out by Chris Statlander, who's beating her up herself. Stokely mocks her on the mic, telling her to wake up, and the heels leave standing tall. Anyway, next up we've got Samoa Joe and Hook with Katsuyori Shibata versus the Premier Athletes. This is following up from their interaction on last week's show, which I predicted this match would happen, and they also had an interaction on Collision where Samoa Joe and Hook documented themselves going into their locker room and absolutely destroying them. Joe and Hook squashed these two guys, and Hook is clearly learning from Samoa Joe, doing the whole nonchalant walk away from the guy diving at you gimmick that Joe also does. I'm liking what I'm seeing from this seemingly new trio right here. Just anything to get away from Jericho. Mercedes Moné versus Zeuxix is up next for the TBS title. Zeuxix, I don't know if I'm pronouncing right either, is from CMLL and is the partner of Stephanie Vaquer, who is of course Mercedes' opponent at Forbidden Door, and I really loved this match between the two. It was a lot more back and forth than I thought it was, with Mercedes taking a brunt of the offense in this match and Zeuxis really getting a lot of offense in. I'm so sorry about this, definitely wrong pronunciation. At the tail end of the match, she hit an awesome double underhook lung buster, which is a move I'd never seen before, and Mercedes kicked out of that, and then soon after hits a Monet maker after dodging a moonsault to score the win. I love this match, a good title defense here. Mercedes and Stephanie Vaquer should be a very good match at Forbidden Door. We then get a video package about Mina Shirakawa before we go to an interview with her opponent at Forbidden Door. That is of course Women's Champion Timeless Toni Storm, along with Mariah May and Luther, and it's announced that there'll be a contract signing next week for that match at Forbidden Door, so that sure will be interesting as Mariah May insists she's on the same page with everyone, and she even offers to help host the contract signing. And next up is TV time with the Learning Tree. Oh god. And this week we have special guest Private Party. I have no idea why they did another one of these segments just 2 or 3 weeks after the last one. Like, surely if you want to do it again, which you shouldn't, just leave at least a couple of months. Why 2-3 weeks is just way too short. It's dreadful again. It's the same dreadful back and forth and bad comedy from Jericho before Jericho starts demonstrating to Private Party how to dive from the top rope, to which they then knock him down and they clear the ring of the Learning Tree and they come out on top in this segment. Thank God Private Party aren't joining the group. Thank the Lord. Awful segment still, but thank God Private Party came out of it unscathed. For now. We get a hype package where Moxley versus Naito is announced for Forbidden Door, and then Daniel Garcia is out as he's got a match with Nick Comoroto, who doesn't even get an entrance, and it's his first Dynamite singles match in nearly 3 years as he is absolutely squashed by Garcia in just over a minute, and the shortest match of the night, which makes for 3 squash matches on tonight's show, which I'll give my thoughts on at the end. Backstage we see Pac and he announces himself for the Owen Hart tournament. We also had Shingo Takagi announcing himself for the tournament early in the show, so this bracket really is starting to shake up and shape up for the men's tournament. Anyway, main event time as it's Rey Fenix versus Will Ospreay for the international title. Remember when Rey Fenix won this belt by accident and had like a 2-week reign? Swerve Strickland is watching this match from the front row, and this match is exactly what you'd expect it to be. The match started off super fast as both guys are flying at each other in and out of the ring, and they get "This is awesome" chants just 2 minutes in before immediately slowing things down after that hot start. This match goes the longest longest of the night, 15 minutes plus, and going through the overrun on TV. After that hot start, they slowed down for a decent bit of time, but they built the pace of the match back up for a hot finish, and that's what we got when Ospreay goes for the hidden blade, just for Phoenix to counter it into a pinfall, which Ospreay kicks out of and immediately hits him with the hidden blade, then stares right at Swerve in the front row before hitting the Swerve stomp from the top rope, another hidden blade, and then getting the win. A great main event, the crowd loved it too, and a big message sent to Swerve Strickland in the front row. Swerve gets into the ring and him and Ospreay exchange words. Swerve loses grip of his title, which Ospreay picks up, and he stands and stares at both belts in his hands, to which Swerve snatches back his title and said, "You're lucky we're friends, because if anyone else did that, I'd put them in their grave." And the show closes like that. I'm going to give the show an 8 out of 10 this week. All the matches were solid bar the squash matches, which is my only issue with this show. There was just too many. 1 is fine, 2 is cutting it just a bit, but 3 on one show is just too much. Like, stretch these out across Collision and Rampage as well. Lots of stories being advanced too for Forbidden Door, and the big announcement with Blood and Guts of course took place, but I really hope the AEW lineup for Blood and Guts is good, because right now it looks like it's Swerve, The Acclaimed, and Daddy Ass, and I don't mind too bad if the Acclaimed were included, because they're homegrown AEW guys, so it makes sense, but surely Daddy Ass can't be making it into this match. But to be fair, Jake Hager has been in a Blood and Guts match before, so anything is possible. AEW could be in trouble. Last night's AEW Dynamite drew the lowest ratings and viewership in the history of the show. So how on earth did that happen, and what could it mean for AEW's next TV deal? A lot happened on AEW Dynamite last night, so let's discuss everything with AEW right now. Like the video, and let's talk about how AEW could be in danger. Let's go ahead and recap last night's AEW Dynamite, as Dynamite kicked off this week with MJF and Rush facing off. This one has been hyped up for a couple of weeks, and I was surprised initially that they didn't do this on Forbidden Door and chose to do it on TV instead, but it turns out there was actually a reason for that, which we'll get to in just a second. But these two had a really good match here, a really great return showing for MJF, and Rush also came out of this looking strong. MJF of course picks up the victory to end the program with Rush, and yeah, this match was very good like I said, and it was also actually supposed to be on Forbidden Door, but it got taken off due to CMLL reportedly not wanting Rush on the show. It's just your classic lucha politics. So that had me wondering what MJF will actually be doing at Forbidden Door, but we got our answer post-match here, as the Cage of Agony and Hechicero appear on the Tron, and it's revealed that it'll be MJF versus Hechicero at Forbidden Door. A match announcement that is kinda out of nowhere, but I guess it's up to AEW now, and all eyes on AEW for how they build this match up. We then had a face-to-face segment with Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland hyping up their world title Forbidden Door match, and this was a really strong segment, the highlight of the show and the segment of the night by far, as Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay are of course just hyping up their match, building up to it. The Don Callis family are backstage watching this entire segment on the TV screen, and they're giving mixed reactions to it, as Ospreay claims that he doesn't need the Callis family, and he says that while Swerve had a hit row, he had a hit list, and he didn't miss one of them. Great line. And just as the segment looks to be over and Ospreay exits the ring with his music playing, Swerve then gets on the mic and says cut the music, and says pretty much how about we make this personal, and tells Will to send regards to his wife and son. Ospreay isn't letting that comment go, he gets right up in Swerve's face and the two stare down, and that's how this segment ends. A great segment to build to these guys' match. Anyway, next up is All-Star Tag Team action, as it's 4v4 action with Mark Briscoe, Orange Cassidy, Dante Martin and Kyle O'Reilly up against Roderick Strong, Zack Sabre Jr., Carl Fletcher, and Takeshita. This match was fun. I just wish they'd mix up the participants in these kinds of matches. I love the All-Star Tag matches, I really do, and I get that all of these guys are in there because they all have matches against each other at Forbidden Door. It's a mix of Orange Cassidy versus Sabre Jr. and the TNT title ladder match, and Strong and Kyle O'Reilly obviously, but half these guys were in a multi-man tag tag just last week. It feels like every week I'm seeing Orange Cassidy and Kyle O'Reilly in some sort of multi-man tag. So just a bit of variety would be nice to see with these matches, but Dante got some good time to shine in this match, which was really cool to see. I've always been a big fan of Top Flight and Dante Martin, and the babyfaces pick up the win as Orange Cassidy pins Roderick Strong. Jack Perry attacks Dante Martin post-match, just continuing the hype up for that TNT title ladder match at Forbidden Door. And then we go backstage where Don Callis, who was absent from this match, which I just realized we had an Orange Cassidy match without Callis and Trent getting involved, which is great to see finally. But Callis is seen talking to Roosh, which is very interesting to say the least. The Young Bucks versus the Acclaimed is up next. The Acclaimed come out and do their rap, but they have their mics cut off during their entrance as it cuts to Okada, who was on production for the night, and he says he is so sorry, bitch. Great moment from Okada again. I knew not much of Okada before AEW because I don't really keep up with New Japan at all. All I knew of Okada that he was a big work rate guy and great in ring, but all I've got from watching Okada so far in AEW, other than his great wrestling ability, is just how funny he is and how entertaining he is in these segments, which I just didn't expect at all given his perception of just being the 5-star match general. But I'm glad to see it, and this match had a very shocking moment as this was a very good match between these two teams, no surprise, but the shocking moment was the Acclaimed picking up the victory, which I saw a lot of people unhappy about this, but it got a big pop from the crowd, who were hot for this entire match and were hot for the Acclaimed, which is why they continue to be pushed, because crazy concept, but wrestlers who the crowd like gets pushed. I know, crazy right? Some people apparently don't get that. Hook and Samoa Joe are backstage with Shibata as cameraman once again. They look to do another hit and run on the Premier Athletes, but they're nowhere to be found, and a note is left challenging them to a trios match on Collision. I am loving Hook and Samoa Joe's Pulp Fiction dynamic and all these angles they're doing. Long may it continue. Next up, Mariah May is hosting the contract signing between Mina Shirakawa and Timeless Toni Storm for their match at Forbidden Door for the women's title. Mina cooks Toni on the mic and says that she's soft now, unlike when she was in Stardom. Toni then threatens to slap Mina, and Mina tells Mariah she needs to choose between the two of them as the contract for the match is signed, but Saraya and Hardy Cameron then come out and they start waffling and distract them as Anna Jay comes in and attacks all of them alongside Saraya and Harley, who stand tall at the end of this segment, and it looks like we have a new member of the Outcasts with Anna Jay. Next up is a quarterfinal Women's Owen Hart tournament match with Chris Statlander versus Nyla Rose. We got the full bracket reveal as well, and based on this bracket, I reckon we're going to see Mariah May beat Saraya, Deonna, and then Statlander to win this tournament. I kind of spoiled the result of this match, but Statlander and Nyla had a really fun match here, and this match did its full intention of making Statlander look strong from it. She came out of this match looking great. Nyla got a good ovation from the fans here as well, as she returned to AEW TV for the first time in a while, seemingly now as a babyface. Good match here from the two, like I said, as Statlander wins with the tombstone, and after the match we hear from Willow Nightingale, who is on the same side of the bracket as Statlander, and I think we're defo seeing these two face off in the tournament. We then had an interview with the Private Party interrupted by the Learning Tree, so close to an AEW Dynamite episode without Chris Jericho on it. So close. And a match between Private Party and the Learning Tree is set up for Collision. Whatever. Private Party better be winning that. But next up, we have Daniel Garcia versus Rhett Titus up next. It's just another squash match for Daniel Garcia. What are these actually doing for him? It's been a few weeks now in a row that we're just getting these last minute announcements for Daniel Garcia being on the show in a random squash. It's always just during the show. A graphic pops up in the bottom left. Daniel Garcia in action, which just wasn't announced all week. And this is just doing nothing for him. Daniel Garcia was a very, very hot act off of Revolution after that TNT title match with Christian Cage, and it feels like nothing has really been done with him since. Just put him in that TNT title ladder match already, for the love of God. Post-match, the Cage of Agony attacked Garcia and also Matt Menard, as MJF looks to make the save and goes after his Forbidden Door opponent, Hechicero, but the numbers game gets the better of him, and out comes Will Ospreay to then make the save, and him and MJF had a little stare down afterwards, and a lot is being foreshadowed with AEW at the moment, and a lot of intersecting stories, and I like that. That's something that AEW has been lacking in for a bit of a while now. Anyway, main event time is up next. It's Claudio Castagnoli versus Pac in an Owen Hart men's match. We also saw this tournament bracket be revealed, and I think whoever the wild card is, which I think it's going to be Hangman, is going to be winning this whole thing. Just kidding, Jeff Jarrett is going all the way and winning at Wembley. A good match here from Claudio and Pac. I wouldn't say match of the night, but this was your typical solid AEW Dynamite main event. Pac manages to pick up the victory with a quick roll-up as he is going to face the winner of Danielson versus Shingo Takagi, and that is how the show ends. In my eyes, a very solid episode of Dynamite. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. All the matches were good once again, and a lot of stories were continued here, with a lot starting as well, and a few even intersecting. Lots going on story-wise with this AEW Dynamite episode. And yeah, like I said, a very solid Dynamite like I thought, which is why I was very shocked to see that this episode drew 502,000 viewers, which as far as I'm aware is the lowest rated Wednesday Night Dynamite ever in the show's history in AEW. It was a 200,000 drop from last week despite being unopposed, unlike last week which was airing against the NBA, and it was also 200,000 less viewers than NXT this week. And following Double or Nothing, we would enter the summer of 2024 for AEW, which ended up being a very busy period for AEW, with some major programs taking place for the product, with Forbidden Door season and Forbidden Door coming up, which of course featured the major program for the world title between Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay. It also featured the match between Mercedes Moné and Stephanie Vaquer, whom of course was sniped and signed by the WWE when AEW was showing interest in signing her, and Stephanie Vaquer has been one of the best WWE signings of the year. Blood and Guts would also take place with Team AEW defeating Team EVPs and Team The Elite, finally ending their reign of terror over the AEW product. Of course, there was All In, easily their biggest show of the year. They had a good attendance for it with about 50k, obviously a drop from the year prior, but that was to be expected. Featuring moments like Nigel McGuinness making his in-ring return, Danielson and Swerve Strickland in AEW's match of the year in the main event. Mariah May and Toni Storm capped off their awesome storyline, with Mariah May capturing the title from Toni Storm, and you had that stinky match between Mercedes Moné and Britt Baker, amongst other parts of this show, for easily AEW's best show of the year, I would say. All Out, of course, was 2 weeks later, also one of AEW's best shows of the year, I would say, featuring the main event of Swerve Strickland and Hangman Page in easily their most brutal and gruesome match so far. And whilst all this was going on, there were heavy rumours of more departures from AEW, with the Lucha Bros being rumoured to be departing the company, as well as Daniel Garcia. The Lucha Bros AEW departure would cause drama down the line, with only one of them actually departing as of right now, but we'll get to that obviously. Whereas Daniel Garcia would end up staying with AEW and would have a big moment for the company at Full Gear. AEW Full Gear took place last night, and as always with any AEW show, it was total craziness. Let's not mess around, let's just get straight into the show, like the video, and let's begin. As we start off with the 0 hour, the pre-show, the show opened with Deonna Purrazzo versus Anna Jay. Deonna Purrazzo is starting her own faction seemingly and might be trying to recruit Anna Jay or something like that. It's a fine pre-show match here from these two, kind of a Rampage or Collision match you'd expect to see. Like I said, the action was fine. Anna Jay gets the win after a sneak pin after reversing the Fujiwara armbar from Deonna Purrazzo. So a big win for Anna Jay there. Then we have the 4-way match with the Beast Mortos, Dante Martin, Commander, and Buddy Matthews. A fun 4-way match here with 4 great wrestlers, great profiles of wrestlers. Buddy and Mortos obviously both being the brutes, and Commander and Dante being the high flyers, although Buddy and Mortos can fly themselves. And Buddy Matthews is very over here for some reason, wherever the show was, Newark, New Jersey. He's very over in Newark, and he gets the win here too, and it's the right call. I could see this being the start of some sort of build for him leading up to Grand Slam Australia, but time will tell. And then we move on to the people's main event of the entire show, Big Boom AJ versus QT Marshall, and I've got a lot more notes on this one because there is a lot more to talk about. The Rizzler gets his own entrance as the timekeeper for the match and gets a crazy pop. I genuinely couldn't believe what I was watching. The match was kind of how you expected. It was slowed down lots of crowd interaction, but the crowd was super into it and were playing along the entire time. Big Boom AJ is super over, obviously. He gets a pop anytime he gets offense in, and also it keeps cutting to the Rizzler every few minutes or few seconds, and he's always hitting the Riz face. What a worker. And this match was fun, man. It was a good time. The crowd were into it. Big Boom AJ was really impressive, an impressive performance after having not wrestled on this scale ever before and properly in 20 years. The match ends when Big Justice hits a spear on QT Marshall and AJ hits the power boom to win as AJ Justice and the Rizzler all celebrate together. 5 stars. No, 6 stars. No, 6 booms. Anyway, moving on to the main show now, we open with the 4-way tag title match, House of Black, Outrunners, The Acclaimed, and Private Party defending their titles. This was your classic 4-way tag match, just pure pandemonium and always something going on. Lots of multi-man spots and non-existent tag 5 counts, you know the vibes. It was a good match, but I wasn't a fan that the main focus of this match was The Acclaimed and their storyline with their potential split. This is Private Party's first title defense. Come on, let's give them something better. Private Party get the win here and retain the belts. We get MJF and Roderick Strong up next. This match was a very nice match, but it felt more to me like a Dynamite main event, mainly because it was very short, especially for a Maxwell match. I feel like MJF always has 20-minute plus matches, and this one went just under 14, about 13 minutes 40 seconds, and so it felt quite short, but that's actually a pretty good length for a match, and I think they got enough in there. I don't think it needed to be longer. I think MJF and Roderick Strong did a good job with the time they were given, and like I said, it didn't really need any more time because they got everything in there. MJF wins with the salt of the earth and snaps Roderick Strong's arm. The Undisputed Kingdom come out to make the save, and Kyle O'Reilly does as well, and Kyle O'Reilly is not happy with Adam Cole. He feels as though it's his fault that this happened. So some stories being advanced there as we move closer to MJF Adam Cole finally having their blow-off match. But up next is Mercedes Moné defending her TBS title against Chris Statlander. I've got a lot more notes on this one as well, and especially after I made a video recently watching all the Mercedes Moné matches, I was really interested to see how this one would go. I knew this would be a good match, but it was way better than good. It's a dominant start for Chris Statlander, but Mercedes comes back with a Rana to the outside and a Meteora against the steps. It's the strength of Chris Statlander versus the speed of Mercedes Moné this entire match, as Mercedes Moné is chopping the wood and targeting Chris's knee. These two have great chemistry, and I saw so much new stuff in this match. You had Stat kipping up into a crazy Meteora instantly from CEO. Mercedes hits a rare 3 Amigos, but the Frog Splash is caught and reversed into an F5. Statlander then goes to the 450, but then Mercedes moves out the way. Just an awesome sequence, and there was so much going on in this match. As Mercedes Moné hits 2 backstabbers and the Moné Maker on Chris Statlander, and Stat kicks out as the first person to kick out the Moné Maker, and a crazy near fall. Chris Statlander goes to the Tombstone shortly after, but Mercedes Moné reverses it with a Casadora, sending Stat throat first into the bottom rope, and then rolls her up for the win. It was a bit of a weird finish, but I don't actually mind when a match finishes with a wrestler hitting a big move just after they've hit a series of finishes on them and they got a near fall. I think that makes sense still. I like when they do stuff like that. And yeah, what a match. This was Mercedes' best match in AEW so far for me, just recently after I did a video where I ranked all of them. Of course, a new best one comes in and happens. Mercedes Moné proving how good she can go in the ring. But up next is Adam Page versus Jay White. This match is part of an ongoing feud that has been going on for a while now, it feels like, with Adam Page and Jay White. I'm not really sure what they're doing with Adam Page, and I'm still kind of scratching my head after watching this match. This match was good Obviously it was good. These are two slick in-ring workers, two smooth in-ring workers. The match had a slow build to it. It worked its way up to a big final act, but the entire match still delivered. And yeah, man, like I said, I don't know what's going on with Hangman Page, because Jay White wins again here. He got the Blade Runner out of nowhere, and I was very shocked to see Jay White win this match. Page attacks Daniels afterwards in anger and maybe will be suspended from AEW. Kinda confused what's going on, but we do get some stuff at the end of the show with Adam Page, which we'll get onto later. Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher are having their grudge match up next after Kyle Fletcher betrayed his good friend. It's your classic Will Ospreay match, your classic Will Ospreay pay-per-view event match. But this one felt a little different to the ones he was in before. There's definitely much more of a story behind this one, and it played into the match, you could tell. The crowd are obviously really into it. They're getting hotter for the match as it goes on, and Fletcher and Ospreay have great chemistry. Fletcher did really well to keep up with Ospreay and have one of Ospreay's best matches in AEW so far. Some crazy spots like Fletcher hitting a tombstone to Ospreay on the steps outside, and then destroying him with a top rope brainbuster to get the win for a huge upset. Huge win for Kyle Fletcher. It seems like AEW are really pushing him now, so I wonder what's next for him as his partner Mark Davis comes out to tend to Ospreay, and surely he's gonna turn at some point. Maybe Aussie Open comes back, but I don't know. Kyle Fletcher's getting a big singles push nowadays. Next up is the Mina Shirakawa and Mariah May celebration segment. This shouldn't be a segment on pay-per-view. Put this on TV. The women's champion should be defending her belt on pay-per-view. Mariah and Mina, they're doing their champagne thing. They're drinking a champagne, doing some dancing, and then Mariah goes to attack Mina, but Mina dodges it before Mariah spits on her, and then Mina spears her off stage through a table. That all escalated very quickly. And then afterwards she starts bloodying her up, and this segment, I don't think it was bad. It was actually an alright segment to me, but it just didn't need to happen. They could have easily done this exact angle on TV weeks ago and then used that to build up to a Mariah versus Mina match on this show rather than starting the build on this show. It's an L for AEW overall here. Jack Perry versus Daniel Garcia for the TNT title is up next. And whilst this wasn't the best match of the show, I think it was still a pretty good match, and probably the best Jack Perry TNT title match so far. Goes to show you what happens when you give him an opponent that's actually been built up with an actual story behind the match, and you get a match with actual heat and the crowd actually care about it. An awesome one-legged pile driver from Daniel Garcia reversing Perry's super kick attempt to get the win and win the TNT title, the correct result. Jack Perry's title reign with the TNT title really wasn't good to me, especially after Adam Copeland and Christian Cage had done wonders for that belt. I don't think Jack Perry had a very good reign with the TNT title, and I really do wonder what the scapegoat does next. Next up though is Takeshita versus Ricochet for the International Championship. Oh man, was this underwhelming. This was easily the worst match of the night, and you wouldn't expect that from these two. These are two objectively great in-ring workers who have had great matches already. They were in that triple threat match with Ospreay and they delivered there, but yet they couldn't deliver singles. And I think the style of match they went for just kinda hurt the match in general. It's slow and methodical. They're doing wrist holds. Like, we're 3 hours into the show at this point. Just go balls to the wall for 12 mins. I saw a lot of people comparing this to AJ versus Shinsuke from Mania 34, which I actually really see the comparisons. Both matches just failing to ever kick it into the next gear. Always feeling like it's on the verge of going to the next gear, but just staying where it is. I guess you could say these guys were wrestling on half gear, not full gear. Ha! Swerve versus Lashley is up next, and this was a match that actually had the right approach to it. This is the match that had, a more methodical style to it. But even so, as the match progressed, they were doing crazier stuff and did kick it into that next gear, did Swerve and Lashley, as this was a good match and a good real debut for Bobby Lashley in AEW. They're doing some good work in the ring before they take it outside, and Swerve hits a swerve stomp to Lashley through the announce table before Bobby Lashley spears him through the barricade. And then in the ring, he puts Swerve to sleep with the Hurt Lock and gets the win here. Good match between the two here, good co-main event. and definitely this story is not finished. There's no way this is the last time Swerve and Lashley faced each other. It definitely felt like they left that door open for another match between the two here. Anyway, it's main event time as it's Moxley defending the world title against the heart and soul of AEW, Orange Cassidy. This match was a brawl from start to finish, and this was definitely the Moxley that we usually know and one of his best performances in a while in an AEW ring, reverting back from that shoot fighter style he's been currently using or recently using and going back to that just brawler style, just trying to kill someone in the ring. It's a Mox match, so there's blood, although to be fair, I don't think Moxley has actually bled in a match in a while, and whilst I didn't like this match as much as their other two matches from previous years, this match was still very good and a good main event to cap off the show, I thought. Mox really punishes and dominates Cassidy throughout this entire match, but Cassidy obviously doing the whole babyface thing of refusing to stay down, and he's never quitting, and he still has the fight. It's a big overbooked ending with lots of interference from the conglomeration and Death Riders and Christian Cage, as Cassidy gets a big near fall using the briefcase on Moxley, right before he is attacked directly by Wheeler Yuta as the ref is distracted, and Mox hits the Death Rider to get the win. And then after the match, Hangman Adam Page comes out and he's staring down with Jon Moxley before Christian Cage then attacks Jon Moxley and looks to be cashing in his briefcase for his world title opportunity, but then Jay White attacks him, and then Jay White is jumped by the Death Riders who exit the scene, and on their way out of the arena, Darby Allin attempts vehicular homicide on them. There is so much going on post-match, and that is how we end the show. I'd give this show an 8 out of 10 overall. This is how I would rank every match. Yeah, Takeshita Ricochet didn't deliver. I'd have liked to see a women's world title match, but a very good show. Match of the night for me was either Mercedes Moné versus Kris Statlander or Big Boom AJ against QT Marshall. I genuinely can't decide. And that brings us to where we are now, and quite recently, where in the last month there has been even more drama over AEW wrestlers leaving, as the Lucha Bros exit drama heated up and Ricky Starks got himself in the middle of a war between AEW and another company. Ricky Starks has been in AEW for nearly 5 years now. He signed for AEW during the pandemic in 2020 and had a solid few years in AEW, being part of Team Taz, facing Sting, winning the tag titles, feuding with CM Punk and beating him, being some of his biggest moments in the company. However, throughout Ricky Starks' entire AEW run, his push hasn't been consistent, and AEW have constantly failed to capitalize on his momentum and push him to the next level when there were opportunities to do so. His last match in AEW took place on the March 30th AEW Collision, as he teamed with Big Bill and they took on Top Flight in a tournament match. A match that Ricky Starks and Big Bill were actually supposed to win, but the match had to be cut off early, with Top Flight instead taking the win after there were fears that Ricky Starks may have got concussed. And as per protocol, the finish was rushed, with Top Flight now being the winners. However though, this ended up just being a false alarm and just a concussion scare, and though they followed protocol correctly, Ricky Starks did not have a concussion and thus was cleared to compete again. But since this moment, Ricky Starks has not been seen or heard from on AEW TV since. And the reason for why Ricky Starks has never been used by AEW has never been explicitly known. However, there are obviously many theories. There were some reports that Ricky Starks had rejected plans for a return, but these were denied by Starks himself. And many speculate the reason why Ricky Starks is in AEW purgatory is because AEW expects him to leave the company to join WWE at some point, and clearly don't see him as a long-term guy. Though there are mixed reports on when his contract in AEW is up, and he's been on the shelf for a while now. Regardless of any speculation though, whenever Ricky Starks has ever been asked about why he's been kept off TV, he has always said he has no idea why, and no reason was ever given. And this all brings us to where we are now, as like I said, Ricky Starks has been on the shelf for 8 months, and on November 23rd, Ricky Starks would take matters into his own hands when he found work elsewhere himself, and would appear for GCW. And in his return promo for GCW, he would address his absence from AEW, stating that he wasn't going to sit at home and let his career dwindle. And with that, more GCW matches and appearances were announced for Ricky Starks, as well as other indie appearances even being announced for GCW's upcoming Hammerstein Ballroom show, a topic that we will definitely get onto later. And then 2 days later, everything would kick off when Ricky Starks appeared on Chris Van Vliet's YouTube channel for an interview, and he had a lot to say about his AEW career. He reaffirms that he's clear and healthy and has no idea why he's been left sitting at home for as long as he has. He then discusses the time it was leaked that he visited Cody Rhodes at the Royal Rumble last year, and talks about how he was confronted by an unnamed AEW wrestler about it.
You know what's so funny about that whole situation? First off, yes, I did go see a friend of mine for his match, obviously, because it was an hour away. So I remember the next day, Sunday, I woke up and like this whole thing was blowing up. And I was just like, what is this? I had people from my job being like, I had one guy, he was just like, were you at the Rumble last night? I said, yeah, and what the fuck about it? What about it? He goes, just saying that's a bad look, you know? I said, how is it a bad look? I can't control somebody taking a security footage while I'm walking to a bus. I don't control that. Like, how is that? Tell me how that is a bad look. We got people on our own program talking about other people at the other company, but yet me having my security footage exposed is a bad look? Give me a break.
And when he was asked about his comparisons to The Rock, it would lead to Starks talking about another incident that Ricky Starks had in AEW with another AEW wrestler.
He did. You know what he called me? Do you remember?
A vanilla midget.
He called me a vanilla midget rock ripoff. You might as well call me a great heel. And I even hate saying and talking like this, but you might as well call me a great heel because I got somebody so flustered on live TV that they stumbled and stuttered their way into one of the worst insults that you could say. That's so, passe, so 2000s. A vanilla midget. I could have hit him with the, I'm black, you idiot, but I didn't at the time. You know what I'm saying? I could have did that. I didn't. Personally, out of all that, I don't think that Ricky Starks came out of that looking very bad. You know what I'm saying? I think it wasn't me that looked bad in that whole situation.
If you're unsure who Ricky Starks or what Ricky Starks is referring to here, he's talking about the time that Adam Copeland, aka Edge, went off script on him. On the October 14th, 2023 Collision, Ricky Starks made a comment to Copeland that seemingly annoyed him, leading to Copeland calling him a vanilla midget rock ripoff in a moment that was definitely not scripted and that he stumbled his words on the way to. And for the rest of the interview, he talks about CM Punk in AEW, fake news surrounding why he was gone, like the rumors of being difficult to work with and rejecting plans. And yeah, man, I'd recommend you just go ahead and watch the full interview for yourself. I'll link it down below. But it would then all kick off further yesterday, as obviously all these clips started getting posted and quoted, and more matches for Ricky Starks in GCW were being announced, until it was then reported last night that AEW had pulled Ricky Starks from his GCW appearances and he would not be appearing for the brand going forward. And many speculated that this had happened due to the comments that had gone viral about his time in AEW and the whole Chris Van Vliet interview and whatnot, and the fact that AEW's misuse of him was being used as storyline in GCW. But later on, some clarity was posted and reported on for why Ricky Starks had been pulled from GCW dates. It was said that Starks was only being blocked from his GCW dates and was still allowed to work other independent wrestling dates, and can still take bookings from other indie wrestling companies. It's just GCW that AEW were now drawing a line in the sand between, with now no AEW talent at all allowed to appear for GCW anymore. And this has nothing to do with Ricky Starks and the comments that were made by him, but rather due to the comments made by GCW wrestler Effie, who discussed how AEW were running the Hammerstein Ballroom not too long after GCW were, and made various comments about Tony Khan and his relationship with his father Shad Khan. Apparently there was exception taken to these words said, and the line has now been drawn in the sand as I previously said, so the entire situation is just a mess, and I can't imagine it's made relations between Starks and AEW any better, as it's cost him bookings when he's still not being used for AEW as it is. Sure, he can still get indie dates elsewhere, and I'm sure he probably will, but GCW are one of the premier indies to work for, and especially given he had just started there and started a storyline there, I can't imagine he's very pleased that he's been suddenly yoinked off of them. By the way, if you want me to watch the GCW Hammerstein Ballroom show for the channel, I absolutely will check it out. I have a mixed opinion on GCW. I like some of the stuff they do, but a lot of the stuff I do, I just don't bother with or I don't think is worth watching. And their last Hammerstein Ballroom show was an absolute train wreck disaster, and I am definitely interested in checking out this second one, and maybe we'll watch it for the channel, so let me know if you want to see that. But with Ricky Starks, I truly have no idea what the future of Ricky Starks and AEW is gonna be. It's looking like 2025 is gonna be his final year in AEW though, and to be honest, if that's the case, then I imagine we probably just won't see him in AEW ever again, and once his contract expires, he will indeed leave and go to the WWE. So where we last left off and what we just discussed in my recent video about Ricky Starks in AEW had just got themselves into their own little war with fellow wrestling company Game Changer Wrestling, aka GCW. It all started when Ricky Starks, who is of course an AEW wrestler, would appear for GCW at a show for them last month. It was a surprise unannounced appearance for Ricky Starks, who hadn't been seen in a ring in a while, as he was sitting on the shelf for AEW, and still is. He hasn't been seen in AEW for a long time for reasons that are unknown. And in his promo for GCW, he would allude to that and talk about how he's not going to sit on the shelf and let his career waste away. And following this, Ricky Starks was announced for more GCW dates, including their Hammerstein Ballroom show that they're running in January 2025. More on that in a second. And he then did an interview with Chris Van Vliet where he had some less than savory things to say about AEW and their usage of him.
Says, I had people from my job being like, I had one guy, he was just like, were you at the Rumble last night? I said, yeah, and what the fuck about it? What about it? He goes, just saying that's a bad look, you know? I said, how is it a bad look? I can't control somebody taking a security footage while I'm walking to a bus. I don't control that. Like, how is that tell me how that is a bad look? We got people on our own program talking about other people at the other company, but yet me having my security footage exposed is a bad look? Give me a break.
This of course brought Starks' issues with AEW into the limelight and further into the public eye, and the very next day it was found out that AEW had pulled Ricky Starks from his GCW appearances. And from first look it would appear that this was done because of what Ricky Starks had said in those interviews, and many presumed this was the case. But some clarity on this was reported later on when it came out that Ricky Starks was still free to go to any of his other indie appearances and to take indie bookings elsewhere, and it was just GCW that he was pulled from, and a line was drawn in the sand there. As it turns out, Ricky Starks' words weren't the reason AEW pulled him off of GCW, but it was rather the words of GCW talent Effie, who had some interesting things to say about AEW owner Tony Khan on a podcast. Effie, unhappy about the fact that AEW announced their Hammerstein Ballroom show not too long after GCW did, and are doing their show around the same time, has some less than savory things to say about the AEW owner.
Still wasn't that sold on tickets, and this is nothing to the talent. I think the talent, you should take anything you can get, but also y'all have no buzz, no draw, and we've been riding the lightning on having to actually run a profitable company for the past few years to continue existing. GCW can't run on a $40 million deficit and continue to run shows, but some of us have the privilege of being able to run at a $40 million deficit.
Brett doesn't own a football team?
Brett does not own a football team. Brett doesn't have a dad who pays him to stay away.
And so reportedly Tony Khan took exception to these comments made by Effie, and so now no talent at all in AEW are allowed to appear on GCW shows. And yeah, that's where we were last up to, and since then a whole lot more has happened. First of all, Effie has pretty much doubled down on what he said before. Listen, I understand why GCW talent and people within GCW are gonna be unhappy about everything that's happened with the Hammerstein show and Ricky Starks. AEW running a show and announcing a show in Hammerstein not too long after you is annoying. AEW pulling Ricky Starks off of GCW shows, it sucks. But unfortunately, complaining about it publicly isn't going to, and clearly hasn't helped things. I mean, it's reportedly what got Ricky Starks pulled in the first place, so for the good of these shows, maybe tone it down a bit on these podcasts. But AEW would take it to the next level in their new weird war with GCW they're in, as this past Thursday on Ring of Honor would see their Ring of Honor World Champion Chris Jericho actually make an appearance on the show for once. As far as I'm aware, this is his first appearance for Ring of Honor since winning the world title again that wasn't a backstage pre-tape. He comes out for his TV time with the Learning Tree or whatever, and is interrupted by none other than Matt Cardona. Matt Cardona comes out and attacks the Learning Tree, and it's been confirmed that it will be Chris Jericho versus Matt Cardona for the Ring of Honor World title at Ring of Honor Final Battle in the Hammerstein Ballroom in just a couple of weeks. If you aren't aware, Matt Cardona, formerly known as Zack Ryder, is one of the biggest names in indie wrestling right now, and probably is the biggest name in indie wrestling if we're being honest, and in GCW as well. He's been a consistent part of GCW for the better part of a few years now since he was released by WWE. He's one of the biggest guys in GCW, and as far as I'm aware, he's still most likely going to be on that GCW Hammerstein show, but what a rib from Ring of Honor this is to have him appear on their show first. I think it's an interesting match to make for their Hammerstein Ballroom show though. As much as I like Matt Cardona and I think Ring of Honor or AEW could sign him and use him, I don't like the fact that Ring of Honor returning to Hammerstein, a historic venue for Ring of Honor, is being used to peddle this war with GCW, and that this match is being made for it because of that, and could be the main event of a show at a historic venue for the company. I think that would be the furthest thing from the original Ring of Honor that this current era of Ring of Honor has ever done, and legit the most WWE ECW shit of all time. I really hope this match does not main event. I think it has a place on the card, it can be done on the card, but do not have it main event. Let Athena main event that show for the love of God. Anyway, the other drama going down in AEW right now is that CM Punk is back in the news once again, and this time it's for the fact his name has been included in a leaked document. A document that was sent to AEW HR and executives by Ryan Nemeth back in September 2023. We all know the story of CM Punk in AEW, I don't need to go over it again, but as we know, he had issues with many people in AEW, one of those people being Ryan Nemeth, the brother of Dolph Ziggler, who worked for AEW for a couple of years, and Ryan Nemeth would constantly take shots at Punk on social media, and this would lead to a confrontation between the two at June 21st, 2023 Dynamite, where Punk and Nemeth began speaking, and Punk allegedly asked Nemeth if they need to take this outside, and quizzed him on his tweets about him. However, reportedly Nemeth said his tweets about him were just in character and apologized, and the two shook hands, and all seemed well up until the August 13th collision where Ryan Nemeth would turn up to the taping only to be sent home because Punk didn't want him there. Both men departed AEW shortly after, and now a document from September 2023 after both those incidents took place that Ryan Nemeth sent to AEW HR and executives was just leaked. In the document, he claims to have been mistreated by Punk, and when he came to AEW with his concerns, he was ignored by them. The document shows claims of AEW threatening legal action over the situation, and he alleges AEW told him to antagonize CM Punk in a promo. He talks about his belief that he was held responsible for Punk's firing, and that he was also offered a settlement worth about 3 years of his salary if he signed an NDA. And interestingly enough, he says that whilst the AEW locker room is full of good people, he doesn't necessarily blame CM Punk for his issues and the issues that happened in AEW. I'll leave the full link to the document down below. There's a lot of interesting stuff on there. AEW have yet to comment on it, nor has Ryan Nemeth to my belief. and I assume that everyone will just kind of move on from this. It's a leaked document that was probably never meant to come out, I imagine. It's a lot of stuff that was already known, but there are some interesting tidbits in there and some insights into how AEW operates and what happened during CM Punk's time in AEW and his drama with Ryan Nemeth. And overall, my thoughts are, this document is from September 2023, it's now December 2024, we're less than a few weeks away from 2025, let's all just move on. It appears as though Nemeth's issues were more so the handling of the incidents with Punk than the incidents themselves. But again, we don't need to talk about this anymore. CM Punk in AEW feels like light years ago at this point. There is something very fishy going on with Rey Fenix in AEW right now. In short, Rey Fenix is basically trapped in AEW right now as reportedly he wants to leave AEW, but AEW are not letting him. Rey Fenix was rumored to be on his way to WWE, but AEW are not letting him leave AEW and keeping him away from WWE. And Rey Fenix is clearly not happy about this and has came out on social media kind of exposing AEW. This entire situation is crazy and there's a lot more to it, so let's talk about all of it and more. Like the video and let's begin. So how did we get to this point? Well, Rey Fenix has been wrestling for a long time, having made his debut in wrestling all the way back in 2005, and he is the brother of wrestler Pentagon Jr., who has gone under many names, most recently going under Penta El Zero Miedo. Together they're known as the Lucha Brothers, and they were teamed together across various promotions, namely AAA, Lucha Underground, TNA, CMLL, and every indie promotion under the sun, having great success and winning titles in nearly every company whose doors they walked through. In 2018, they were part of the original All In show, and then a few months later, at the start of 2019, when All Elite Wrestling was formed, they were signed to the company as OG members of the AEW roster. The Lucha Bros spent much of their first year in AEW feuding with the Young Bucks as they exchanged wins in a great series of matches. It was also the Young Bucks who 2 years later they would beat at All Out 2021 to win the AEW tag titles for the first and only time. And along the way, they also picked up and were joined by Puck to form the Death Triangle trio, and the Lucha Bros tag title reign lasted until the start of 2022 when they lost them to the Jurassic Express in a match where Fenix dislocated his elbow pretty graphically. And when he returned from injury, himself and Death Triangle were looked to capture the newly introduced trio's titles, but lost in the first round of a tournament for them. The tournament and titles were won by the Elite, who the same night were involved in some incidents that led to them getting suspended and being stripped of the titles. And Death Triangle would go on to capture those vacant belts, winning them in September of 2022. Following the Elite's return, they'd feud with Death Triangle in a best of 7 series over the belts, with the Elite coming out on top at the start of 2023. And Fenix would see more gold in 2023 as the Lucha Bros won the Ring of Honor tag titles, and Fenix would also win the international title. Though this was not meant to happen and was not the original plan for this match, as champion Jon Moxley got injured during the course of the match with a concussion, and so they were forced to change the finish on the fly, and Rey Fenix picked up the victory and won the international title in what was essentially now an accidental title reign. And Fenix's international accidental title reign only lasted 2 weeks as he lost it to Orange Cassidy. And since this, Rey Fenix and Penta's usage on TV has been inconsistent, and they haven't really done anything meaningful or of note or been part of any big programs since this. Which takes us over to 2024, where earlier this year rumors began arising that the Lucha Brothers were set to be on their way out of AEW and on their way to WWE. However, it was then reported soon after that whilst Penta's contract was coming up, Rey Fenix wasn't going anywhere, as Rey Fenix had just had injury time added onto his contract by AEW, which was later reported to be an extra year, essentially trapping him in the company until the end of 2025. And these reports were proven correct when this past week Penta was removed from the AEW roster page, as it was reported he was now a free agent, whereas Rey Fenix's profile still remains up. Rey Fenix is essentially trapped in AEW until the end of 2025, and Rey Fenix is seemingly not very happy with how he is not allowed to leave, and has tweeted and now deleted various posts on Twitter, as he first tweeted out saying, "No one stays in a place where they received inhumane treatment. and then 2 days later tweeted, "I needed a doctor and you ignored me for months." And the same day as that tweet, a report came out that was tweeted out on Twitter which described the Rey Fenix situation as a huge injustice and saying that there's a real story behind the situation, which Rey Fenix would respond to by describing it as, "So far the most accurate comments." However, if you heard what I said earlier, Rey Fenix has since deleted all these tweets, so yeah, something very fishy is going on here. Maybe the most worrying tweet is the one about him being ignored when needing a doctor, which many pointed to CM Punk's interview with Ariel Helwani, where he said something similar and how he experienced something similar about how AEW didn't contact him at all when he was injured and he had to book his own surgery. This was a bad look for AEW, and if it's a similar case for Fenix, then it's an even worse look. Regardless, I think any sane wrestling fan can agree that if Rey Fenix wants to depart AEW, then he should be allowed to do so and shouldn't be held hostage in the company and forced to stay. Especially if AEW aren't going to use him and they're just going to pay him just to sit at home and just be put on the shelf. What good does that do anyone? There is no positive to that. AEW have shown numerous times that they mostly refuse to release anyone who requests it. It's happened a few times and they need to stop doing it. Everyone used to look down on WWE when they used to do it, and AEW was meant to be the alternative to that. So fix up. It seemingly happened earlier this year with Miro, who reportedly requested his release, but is still listed on the AEW roster. I also seem to remember it happening with Malachi Black, and cases of wrestlers sitting at home for AEW who's not using them and refusing to use them can also be seen with Ricky Starks. So it's nothing new with this entire Rey Fenix situation we've got going on here. As I said though, Penta is a free agent and I highly suspect he's going to be debuting for the WWE very soon. Penta is a star who can go to WWE and be debuted without Rey Fenix. They can just get him, and I could really see WWE throwing him into NXT, and I think that could be a good idea for him to be used that way. Penta would very much stand out in NXT just from his look alone and his style. It would be different to anything on the NXT roster. It would bolster the NXT World Title division, which is really needed, and it can be something for him to do as a solo act and an introduction to the WWE style before he goes to the main roster, maybe alongside Rey Fenix once he's available and they're both signed to the company. Regardless of how WWE do it, I can be pretty confident and firmly say that I think Penta will end up in WWE in some way, even if they do wait until Rey Fenix is out to sign them both together. And hey, I'd also be willing to bet that if Penta does go to WWE first, he will be very over in WWE, especially once again if he goes to NXT. They'll just love him because, like I said, he'll just really stand out there. But with Rey Fenix, it just continues to be a waiting game. As it stands, he'll be out of the company in about a year's time, unless AEW does what they should do and does the right thing and does what everyone is screaming at them to do, which is just let Rey Fenix go. Based on what Fenix has said on social media, I imagine he's going to have a lot to say about his AEW run when he's out the company, and maybe that's a reason why AEW are hesitant to let him go. Regardless of all the controversy and the incidents and everything, this entire situation, I think the fact that AEW are about to lose the Lucha Bros is really bad for AEW. This was an OG team in AEW who throughout their entire run weren't really booked very consistently, and sure, they had title reigns and time periods of where they were being pushed, but that push was never consistent, and there were times in AEW where they were just doing pretty much nothing. The Lucha Bros were a team that should have been at the very top of the AEW tag division for the entire time they were there, not just for certain moments in time. And hey, I'll go there, maybe if they pushed them a little better and AEW were more consistent in their usage of them, then maybe they would have stayed, or at least had a better chance of keeping them and retaining them. It looks as though they'll be on their way to WWE at some point in time, and when they do go, I'm sure they're gonna be stars there. However, as of right now, Rey Fenix is trapped in AEW. And that more or less caps off 2024 for AEW, with only one pay-per-view left, that being World's End, coming up at the very end of this year. And so overall, the big verdict, was 2024 AEW's worst year ever? I would say no. Probably their second worst year ever, I'd say. 2023 is still absolutely the worst, but 2024 saw AEW still feeling the effects of the CM Punk drama as ratings and attendances would continue to dwindle. But despite all the talk and malark about, oh, AEW is going to die, AEW is not going to last another year, they of course secured that huge media rights deal which will see AEW Dynamite and other AEW programming airing on Max starting 2025. So AEW lives on another year, and I guess we'll see if they can bounce back in 2025. Guys, that's it for this video. If you did enjoy it, then smash the like button on it. I hope you enjoyed this kind of chronological retelling of the year that was AEW through my content I made for the year. Leave a comment down below saying your best moment of AEW for the year and your worst moment of the year for AEW. And subscribe with notifications on so you never miss a video on the channel. I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye and keep on rolling.